Thank you guys for joining me and showing up on time. Uh, on time is late and early is on time. So congratulations to you guys for figuring that out. Let's go ahead and jump right into it because we got a lot of stuff to cover today. And I'm endeavoring to get us back to that hour to hour and a half schedule we talked about. Is that okay? You guys okay with that? Yes? Okay, cool. All right. So, Real Investors event, can we start with a prayer, please? Dear Lord, we thank you for your wonderful hand upon us. We just ask for your hand upon this country. We ask for a hand upon its leadership. And as we go through this time of transition, that you just continue to bless us, continue to keep us safe. And Lord, in all we do, may we be an example of you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, let me go ahead and share my screen. And if you guys can see my screen okay, can you give me a nice big thumbs up? Should say 21 days to real estate riches. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. So your workbooks are coming out shortly. I made a conscious decision today to move a couple things around, and that's why you didn't get your workbooks earlier, but I will make sure that you guys get your workbooks. If not later on tonight, certainly first thing in the morning, but don't worry about it. Everything you need for today, I'm going to give it to you today. And everything you need for your homework, I'm going to give it to you before we get out of here. So do not fret, do not fuss. You will get your workbooks, and there's going to be a lot of stuff in that workbook because this is going to be a busy week. As I said at the end of last week, we're going to go in motion. Here's where we stay in motion and start putting the pieces in place to start making some money, making some serious money. And so there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to sort of hack our way through. And that's a little inside pun. We're going to hack our way through, but I'm going to be with you every step of the way. We're doing this live. If you have questions, you'll have plenty of time to review the material before I go over it in class. And if you have questions, by all means, please, this is not the week to be shy. You can ask questions through the chat box. You can ask questions through the chat box now. If it's something that I just need to really slow it down and demonstrate it, then I'll pick somebody or you'll pick yourself, and we'll go through it slowly so that you can see what's going on and that you can fully grasp what we're working on. If you missed yesterday's session, you really did yourself a disservice. We had a great session yesterday. Again, yesterday was supposed to be just sort of a catch-up day, but the questions we got were just such high caliber. And unlike the sessions during the week, yesterday was open microphone. Everybody could speak. Everybody could see each other's face. And you really, really, really missed a good one if you missed yesterday. So it's in the Facebook group. You can go back and watch it. If you did not participate live, I strongly encourage you to go back and watch it. I dropped a couple of nuggets here and there that I wasn't expecting to drop, but that happens when we do a live class. We had a chance to really talk about really sort of ahead of the game, how to build a private investor list and how to cultivate private investors. And I think those who were here found that dialogue and that conversation very enlightening. If you were here yesterday and you got something out of that conversation about building a private investors list, give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Yeah. So that was very enlightening. I think people had some questions about some things they still weren't clear on, and I had a chance to go through them step by step in detail. So it was really a fantastic, fantastic session. So if you weren't here live, do yourselves a favor and go watch it sometime before tomorrow's class. Tonight's homework is really going to be pretty light. That's by design. Like I said, I made a last minute decision to sort of take some of the stuff I was going to give you today and really sort of shove it into tomorrow and the following day. So that'll give you a chance to A, go watch yesterday's review session, and B, if you're still not caught up from the first week, which everybody should be. I mean, come on, let's just be honest. Everybody should be up to date. Everybody should be caught up. But if for some reason you're just finding yourself straggling, here's another sort of 24-hour window to catch up so that you really don't get lost when we really put this thing in high gear. And I know many of you guys are chomping at the bit for us to put this thing in high gear, and that's what we're going to start doing tonight. But I'm going to sort of ease you into it. But starting tomorrow, you want to really be right there with us. So if you missed yesterday's session, go watch the recording of it. And if you're still not caught up, you still haven't got your Maryland LLC, if you're in Maryland and doing business in Maryland, if you're not going to do business in Maryland, don't worry about it. but you should still follow the examples I gave you 2 days ago and yesterday to get your LLC set up, because you really want to have that clone in place. You really want to have that body armor in place before you get out there and start doing the things I'm going to be teaching you. Okay. So here's where we are. We are in week 2. We're now starting to get into the part of the training that I call the quick cash generator, where I'm going to show you how to actually start generating cash, putting cash in your pocket and doing it very, 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 very quickly, almost on demand. And then when we finish off this week, we'll ease on into week 3, where I talk about how to put it on autopilot. But I got to tell you, of the 3 weeks that this course encompasses, the 21 days that this course encompasses, this is the heavy lifting week. This is where the rubber really hits the road, because this is where I start showing you how to make some serious money. So in terms of where are we, oops, I always forget one thing, forgive me. This is week 2, and today we're going to talk about the deal maker's blueprint. And this is sort of, again, a little bit foundational. If you're going to be out there making money, doing deals, this is the blueprint for making that happen. And it doesn't matter what kind of deals you're talking about. And then we're going to get into the first part of hacking the matrix. We'll start it today, and then we'll go sort of full on tomorrow, and then have a follow-up the day after tomorrow. But we're going to really get into what I call hacking the matrix. This is my favorite part of the whole lesson. So first question I'm going to ask you, here's your first quiz. I got 4-question, 4-part quiz. So please go to the chat box and type in your answers. Fill in the blank. And you guys have heard this over and over again from the case studies. And I want you to fill in the blank by typing it into the chat box. You ready? If you really want to make serious money in real estate, you need to listen to, fill in the blank, type it in the chat box. You really want to make serious money, you need to listen to, serious money in real estate, you need to listen to, yes, Sherman. Isn't that what you've heard over and over again from the folks in the case studies? Yeah, see, that was easy. I gave you an easy one. All right. All right. Question number 2. Question number 2. Okay. The currency of real estate is, oh my God, I cannot stump you guys. Deals. That's right. The currency of real estate is deals. If you want to be a player, if you want to be thought of seriously, if you want people to return your phone calls and respond to your emails, we need to get good at deals, because that's what makes this business work. All right. So having said that, let's talk about the deal maker's blueprint. The deal maker's blueprint. And if you have your AHA sheets or something to write with, and you will be getting this chart. You'll be getting this chart as a part of the packet for this week. Okay. So don't worry about the chart, because you're going to have your own copy of it. Worry about the 7 steps that comprise the chart. So there's 7 parts to what I call the deal maker's blueprint. And this is a process. I try to break down the process as simply as possible. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about commercial deal making. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about residential deal making. And it doesn't matter which strategy you're trying to deploy. So last week, we talked about the 13 different ways to make money. If you are going to be successful as a deal maker, you are going to follow these 7 steps, regardless of which strategy you pick. You want to do lease options, you're going to follow these 7 steps. You want to be a wholesaler, you're going to follow these 7 steps. You want to buy, hold real estate and build a portfolio, you're going to follow these 7 steps. And you will get it. The print's a little bit teeny. Don't worry about it. I've got 7 slides that go over each one of these steps. And so you kind of like looking at a clock, you kind of start at the 1 o'clock position and work your way down to 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. Okay. And then this side, there's the reason why you've got this sort of line through in a cloud. This side over here is an embellishment of what happens in step number 5. Okay. So step number 5 talks about your team, leveraging your team, building your team. And this little sort of breakout over here talks about who should be on your team. These 7 steps we will cover today. This part over here will cover the day after tomorrow. In other words, who should be on your team, okay? But I want to go through the 7 steps today. And again, these 7 steps apply whether you're doing commercial deal making, residential deal making, and any one of those 13 strategies we talked about in the Real Estate 101 section last week, okay? So don't come at me going, well, Sherman, what do I need to do if I want to do subject to? These 7 steps. Sherman, what do I want to do if I want to own properties and be a landlord? These 7 steps. Sherman, what if I want to transition from residential into commercial? These 7 steps. Got it? So how many steps are there to deal making? Put it in the chat box, please. Put in chat. 7. 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. And these 7 steps apply to what part of deal making? All. That's a Chuck Norris question with a Chuck Norris answer. All of them. Okay? So it doesn't matter what area of the business that you want to get started in. You're gonna apply these 7 steps no matter what. Okay? And again, it doesn't matter whether it's residential or commercial. So let's just jump right into it. What are these 7 steps? And again, I will be giving you this chart in the handout that I'm going to send you. So don't worry about recreating the chart, but I do want you taking notes on the 7 steps so that when I give you the chart and you're like, I can't quite read what that is, because it is a little teeny. And if I put it in a format to get it to you, it's still going to be it's going to be even teenier. Normally what I do is I put this in a blueprint that's like sort of like 14 by 17. But we didn't, again, the whole purpose of this is to make it digital so that everything is downloadable. And most people don't have what's called a wide format printer. So even if I gave you the full on blown up blueprint, you're probably going to print it on an 8.5 by 11 printer, and it's still going to be a little teeny. So that's why I'm taking the time to go through each one of these 7. And I'll also include at least this batch of slides so that you can match them up with the chart. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up? Is that all right with you guys? Is that okay? Oh, you're not giving me thumbs up now. Y'all mad at me now. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go through these 7 steps. All right, step 1. The first step in the process, and you'll see the arrow right here at the top of the chart. There's a little baby version of the chart as we go around. Step 1, the first step in any kind of deal making is generating leads. Letting people know what you're up to. Getting people, specifically your target market, to reach back to you and say, yeah, I am interested in selling my house. I am in a situation where I'd like to talk to you about how do you lease option my house. So again, it doesn't matter which one of those 13 strategies we talked about, being a bird dog, being a wholesaler, yada, 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 yada. The first step is generating leads. And the most important thing when it comes to generating leads is you want it to be as cost effective as possible. I see a lot of newbie investors invest money in software and training programs, and then they're told by that coach, that mentor, the creator of the course, okay, now you got to print up a whole bunch of flyers. Now you got to print up a whole lot of bandit signs. Now you need to put up some ads. Now you need to put up websites. And they blow through hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, trying to generate leads, only to realize that, hey, I just spent $3,000 on websites and I got 1 lead. Well, that's a heck of a slap in the face. So whatever strategy you deploy, the number one thing you got to be thinking about is, how do I make this as cost effective as possible? Now, there are some instances where you can get free leads, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then there's going to be other instances where the value of the transaction is so high, meaning if I actually get a deal, I'm going to make so much money that you may want to spend a little bit of money. But I generally recommend that, especially when you're brand new to the game, especially when you're first getting started, try to make your lead generation as cost effective as possible. And that's why when I finish sharing with you these slides, it's going to become patently obvious to you as to where you should get started as an investor and what areas you may want to put off or avoid until you got a little more experience under your belt, okay? But again, it doesn't matter whether you want to be a wholesaler, a bird dog, buy, hold, lease option, sub to. The first step in that process of deal making is generating leads, getting the marketplace to come to you or come to your website or come to your desktop, or in some cases, come to your iPhone, because there are all kinds of mobile tools out there. And I'm going to share with you a couple of them before we finish off today's session. But step one is generate leads. All right, you guys now tell me in the chat box, what's step one? What's step one? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Generate leads, generate leads. And ideally, we want to always have a cost-effective way to generate leads. So if you want to put in cost-effective way, I'll take that too, all right? So to generate leads, at some point in time, we're going to have to build and own a marketing funnel. We're going to have to build and own the marketing funnel. Now, why does Sherman say own? What's that all about? I see a lot of folks out there who spend money with third-party vendors or spend money with on boot camps, and they invest in the software that the boot camp owner or the boot camp promoter or the speaker is promoting, only to find out that if they don't keep on paying that speaker money, all the leads they generate go away. Some of you guys have experienced these horror stories, and some of you seen these horror stories. You know, you go to boot camp and they can say, hey, for only $500, we'll give you this piece of software and it does this and it does this and it does this. Well, what they don't tell you is it's $500 every month. And then you invest in the software and then you're like, I can't afford to keep paying that $500 every month. So you stop paying it, and all of a sudden all your funnels evaporate. All your websites evaporate. Everything that was a part of your front end lead generation is poof, gone, because you're no longer paying the fee. Really important that when we get to that phase, get to that step where we are actually generating leads, that we own and we control the pieces of the puzzle, the parts of the process, so that we're not held hostage or held captive to somebody else. If we want to make a change in the lineup of our team, we don't want to have to pay an exit fee. What do I mean by that? I oftentimes liken being a real estate investor to being the owner of a professional sports franchise. And every sports team has, you know, a variety of players. Some sports teams have really, really, really hot shot all-star players, and some have just sort of, you know, average, but they can get the job done players. Well, if your quarterback breaks their leg and they can't play, or they don't play as well as they used to, do you really want to have to pay somebody $20 million to take them off your hands? That kind of feels like being held hostage. And you never want to feel as an owner of a team that you're being held hostage just because you want to exit a relationship or move on. And again, as we talk about generating leads, it's always best to look for tools. It's always best to look for parts where we can take it with us if we decide to change relationships. We want to control as much of that as possible, especially when we start spending serious money for it, okay? All right, so step one, generate leads. Step two, we need a system or a process or a piece of software, or I like to say back of the envelope, but we need a procedure or process to be able to quickly evaluate those leads and be able to say, okay, is this a deal or even a potential deal, or this is a dud? This is a deal or dud. So we need some kind of a evaluation process so that as these leads come in, we're not spending an inordinate amount of time, too much time trying to evaluate them, okay? Ideally, if you're doing what you should be doing, you should be generating like hundreds of leads a week. And because it all at the end of the day, it always sort of comes down to the numbers. If I'm working off the rule of percentages, meaning, hey, if I do certain things and it fundamentally comes down to a 3% success ratio or a 10% success ratio, well, if I want to get one thing to happen and my odds of making something happen are on a 10% ratio, that means I need to at least get 10 leads to get one client, 10 leads to get one deal, right? Does that math make sense to everybody? So I need to come up with a very simple process to evaluate the 10 to get to the 1. Said another way, I got to kiss 9 toads to get to the prince or the princess. And you need to have a process for doing that. Now, fortunately for us, and I'm going to get more into this tomorrow, but you can go ahead and write this down today. It's not on the slides. I probably should have put it there. We have something called the Mayo Formula. Mayo Formula. In fact, let me go ahead and type that in right now. I'm going to say insert text box. And we have something called the Mayo Formula. And that's really, sort of a shorthand tool for evaluating the leads, right? So it's Mayo stands for maximum allowable offer. That's what Mayo stands for. So let me put this. And that's sort of a back of the envelope way to evaluate all of these leads that come in to very quickly decide, hey, is this worth pursuing or not? Now you can get fancier and more sophisticated. You can have software. We start getting into commercial deals. You start, building spreadsheets and doing what they call pro forma analysis. But even if I'm doing a commercial deal where I might have a full-blown spreadsheet, I'll still start the process on the back of a napkin. And in the world of commercial real estate, I'll use something called the cap rate analysis or net operating income cap rate analysis. Don't worry about what that is because that's beyond the context of this class. Just understand this. I can ask 3 questions or 2 questions really of somebody who's looking to sell a commercial property. And on the back of the napkin, I can very quickly assess, 30 seconds or less, is this conversation even worth pursuing? Well, in the world of residential, which is where we're focusing our attention, we need to know this Mayo Formula, which I'm not teaching tonight, but I will be teaching this week, because that gives us like a back of the napkin way to sort of say, is this worth evaluating or not? Because you don't want to waste a lot of time on something that's not even potentially a deal. Does that make sense to everybody? If it does, give me a thumbs up. All right. So we'll be talking about more about how to implement this stuff, but I want to sort of get it up on the table. Again, this is a blueprint. This is a framework. This is how we go about doing business. So step 2 in the process is some kind of way to evaluate, and it can be software, it can be back of the napkin, it could be a website, it could just be for your mental exercise. As we move along this week and get deeper into it, I'll show you how to work the Mayo Formula. I'll show you some software out there that's available. But for right now, just understand this. Step 2 in the process is evaluating these leads. And we got to be able to do it fairly quickly so we don't waste too much time analyzing something that's not really a deal. And quite frankly, the simpler the better, because we also don't want to become victim of paralysis of analysis. Y'all know what I mean when I say paralysis of analysis? You guys understand what I'm saying? If you know what I'm saying, put that in the chat box. What is your definition of a paralysis of analysis? Anybody? We want to make sure we avoid the paralysis of analysis or whatever we're doing. All right, meaning, yeah, exactly. Studying too long, overthinking, having an evaluation process that's too complicated. Like if every time you want to evaluate a deal, you got to run to your computer and pull up a piece of software or spreadsheet, that's way too hard. Better to figure out how to do something simple or simplistic on the back of a napkin. And then if it sounds good, we go on to step number 3, and then you can circle back and do a more thorough analysis, okay? So having said that, what's step number 3? Step number 3 is tie it up. Tie it up. And this is where our written agreements come into play. And so we talked a great deal last week about the Constitution. We talked a great deal about the difference between being a wholesaler and a bird dogger. And we talked about the fact that as a wholesaler, you're actually putting something under contract and then selling the contract for a profit. And you don't earn a fee, you earn a profit. Well, a big part of any kind of deal making is having the right tools to tie up a deal if on your first cut, your first analysis, it looks like it's a go. All right, so if it looks like it's a go, it's like, hey, I want to use some kind of a written agreement, because we talked about the fact that real estate contracts have to be in writing, right? Remember last week we talked about the 8 elements of a contract, and and the 8th element was the formalities of a contract. And when it comes specifically to real estate contracts must be in writing. Anybody remember that? Remember that? Say yes in the chat box. Tell me you remember it. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. So we need to have written agreements. Now, here's the deal. In the world of real estate, there are typically 2 types of written agreements that we use to tie up a property: contracts and letters of intent. Contracts and letters of intent. When it comes to residential, we're really not going to use letters of intent. We're not, and the main reason why we're not going to use letters of intent is because a letter of intent technically is not a contract. It's just something in writing that says we're agreeing to talk. And you're not really tying a property up when you use a letter of intent. So I do not recommend using letters of intent to tie up a residential property. You might as well just go ahead and go to a full-blown contract with the appropriate weasel clauses. And I'll get to what a weasel clause is in a second. But we need to, and I probably should put that in there. Let's do that too. Weasel. Oops. Okay, so we're going to use predominantly in the world of residential contracts, because once we do a basic analysis, we generate leads, we do a basic analysis, it looks pretty good, let's tie it up. Because it doesn't make sense to spend too much time raising money and the other things we need to do if we don't first have the deal tied up. And a contract is a much firmer, more powerful, more ironclad way to tie it up. And we can put weasel clauses in our contracts so that if we later on find out the deal's not as good as we thought it was, we have a legitimate and legal way to weasel out of the deal, okay? So step 1, what's step 1? Give it to me again. What was step 1? You guys remember? Put it in the chat box. Put it in the chat box. What was step 1? Yep, generate leads. Step 2, if I remember what step 2 was, what was step 2? What was step 2? Analyze the deal, analyze the leads. We don't know for a fact it's a deal yet. So we got to kiss the toads to find the prince. We got to kiss the toads to find the princess. So evaluation. So we're going to evaluation tool. And we don't want to get too deep in the evaluation yet, because we can tie up the deal, step 3, and after we got the deal tied up, come back and do a deeper level of analysis. And if the deal doesn't look like what we thought it was, exercise our weasel clause to get out. Now, real quick, just a quick aside, why in the world of commercial real estate do they use letters of intent? The reason why they use letters of intent when they're doing commercial deals is because, generally speaking, all contracts for commercial deals are typically case by case, deal by deal. And generally speaking, on a commercial deal, you can spend anywhere from $7,000 to $30,000 just on the contract. So you kind of want to have something in between, and it's generally accepted in the world of commercial real estate that a letter of intent is kind of like a written handshake. If for some reason you want out of the deal, you can kind of get out of the deal without a lot of repercussions. But it's sort of a quote unquote gentleman's agreement, a gentlewoman's agreement, that we're at least going to be talking to each other exclusively, like an engagement, before we go ahead and do the full-blown act of getting married. Okay? And so before we start spending thousands of dollars on the contract, let's at least have something in writing that says we are talking exclusively and do intend to do this deal together. And oftentimes what's in the letter of intent gets handed over to the lawyers, and that becomes the basis of the contract. Residential real estate, you're generally not going to spend thousands of dollars. In fact, before we get out of here tonight, I'm going to show you how we can get some contracts that we can use for free without needing a lawyer. So you might as well just go ahead and go straight to the contract, because you're not spending the kinds of thousands of dollars that we spend in commercial deals. So again, I generally recommend don't even bother with the letter of intent when you're doing residential. Just go straight to the contract, okay? And anybody who sells you a course on how to do letters of intent for residential, just know this, you just got ripped off if you bought it. Nobody uses letters of intent for residential. You just don't. Just go straight to the contract. All right, step number 4. Get the money. Get the money. All right, what's step number 4? Get the money. So as an example, if I'm out there looking for single family houses to add to my rental portfolio, I can go to my banker, I can go to my private investor and sort of describe generically what the deal looks like, but nobody's going to write me a check until I do what? Anybody here got any experience doing residential real estate? When do you typically get a check from a lender before you have a ratified contract? No. You get the money after you have a ratified contract. In other words, nobody's going to take your deal seriously until you have a ratified contract, meaning all stipulations have been accounted for, both parties have had a meeting of the minds, both parties have signed off on and agreed to and put their signature, and some kind of earnest money deposit or other consideration has changed hands. That's when you got a ratified contract. And that's when you go to the lender and say, look, I have this property under contract, here's the closing date, can you go ahead and fund this deal? Now, you may have had prior conversations. You may have gotten a proof of funds letter or a lender letter just generically talking about what was going to go on, but you're not going to get a firm commitment from a lender. And generally speaking, you're not going to get a firm commitment from your private investors until you actually have a fish on the hook, a deal on the line, a property under contract. So we need to tie it up, and then we go get the money, okay? And again, we're tying it up using a weasel clause, so that if anywhere along the way, typically during what's called the due diligence phase or the evaluation phase, anywhere along the way, it looks like it's not as good as a deal as we thought it was, we can exercise the weasel clause to get out, okay? So give me the steps again. Step number 1 is what? Put it in the chat box. What's step number 1? What's step number 1? Thank you. Generate leads. Generate leads, generate leads. What's step number 2? What's step number 2? Give it to me again. Step number 2, analyze the deals. What's step number 3? What's step number 3? Tie it up. Exactly. Quick and dirty analysis. If it looks like it's a potential deal, tie that sucker up. Don't let it get away. And then step number 4, go out and start raising the money, or go out and start getting the money. Because again, even the process of getting money takes a little bit of time. All right. So then step number 5, you've got a commitment for the money. You got a property under contract. Now we engage our team to say, hey, what am I missing? Here's where I grab my contractor and say, hey, I got it under contract. Remember how you told me it was going to cost $35,000 to fix it up? Let's go through that property one more time just to make sure we didn't miss something. Here's where we get on the phone with our mentor. Here's where we get on the phone with our coach and say, hey, I got this property under contract and I'm moving forward with getting the funding. Can you please make sure you're looking over my shoulder to make sure I didn't miss anything and I'm not screwing this thing up and there's something that's not going to bite me in the butt. Okay. So step 5, engage your team. Real estate is a team sport. You're not going to know everything. Maybe when you have the property tied up and you're getting ready to do the funding, you bring in a property inspector because you notice that the basement smelled a little moldy. And you want to bring in an expert to tell you, hey, does the property have mold? And then a different expert to say, hey, am I going to have a water problem if I buy this house? Or should I just go ahead and pass because maybe this basement's always wet and that's just going to be a nightmare for me. That's where you start bringing in members of your team or using your existing team to bring in other members with specific expertise like mold remediation, water penetration, solar panels and what that means, right? And you start getting into the world of commercial real estate, and you got a boiler, you get in the world of residential real estate, and you got an oil tank on the property. Well, how do I get rid of that? You know, I bought this property and there were tires that I didn't see. How do I get rid of those? You know, hey, can I really rent this property if it's got a spiral staircase? Because I've never seen a spiral staircase on a property. You know, you bring your property manager and go, what do you think? And they're like, tear it out, because you're not gonna be able to rent that space. Nobody wants to go up and down spiral stairs to get to the bedroom every night. You know, so this is where you know, after you get it tied up, and you started moving forward with getting the money, this is where you start engaging your team to make sure that you're not making any mistakes. The typical time to close a deal from the time it goes under contract to the time it actually closes in residential is about 30 to 60 days, with the average being about 45. The amount of time it takes to close a deal commercial from the time you put it under contract, depending on what kind of commercial deal it is, could be anywhere from 2 months to 6 months. And if it's a piece of land, it could be years. So after you have it tied up, after you initiate the process to get the money, because that could take some time in and of itself, then you bring your team in and say, okay, tell me what you guys think. And if it looks anywhere, any way, any shape like it's a deal you should walk away from it. If it looks like it's a deal, but it's not a great deal, have the chief negotiator on your team renegotiate the deal. I've done that many a time. Property's under contract. We said we're going to close in 2 weeks. Oops, we found a problem that the seller didn't disclose. Seller, first thing I need more time. We're not going to close in 2 weeks. We're going to close in a month. And I need a price reduction because you represented that it was XYZ and it ain't XYZ. It's PDQ. And you, for whatever reason, were not disclosing the full information. So now I go back to my chief negotiator. On some deals, my chief negotiator is me. On some deals, if I got somebody on the team who's a better negotiator than I am, it's them. But you go back and renegotiate after you got the property tied up. Let me ask you a question. What leverage do you have in negotiating if you don't even have the property under contract? And everybody put that in the chat. Yeah, none. Zip. Nada. Not a prayer. And I see newbie investors get all hung up time and time. Whoa, what if I do this? What do I do? And what? I'm like, dude, do you have the property under contract? No, don't even worry about it. Because while you're sitting there spinning around thinking all this stuff, somebody else is putting that property under contract and it's not even your property. Somebody else got the deal because you were too busy analyzing, going through the what ifs, coulda, shoulda, wouldas. If you're going to be a deal maker, you want to not only know these 7 steps, you want to have them down cold so you can move with speed. Speed is your friend. If the deal's good, get it under contract and then do your evaluation and then do your analysis and then bring in your team to say, hey, am I missing anything? And if you missed a step or something's not what you thought it was, or the seller said something that later on proves to be untrue, then renegotiate the deal you have tied up. But if you don't have the horse tied up, the horse isn't really yours and never will be. So stop spinning around in orbit thinking all these things when you don't even have the property tied up. Does that make sense to anybody besides me? If it does, give me a thumbs up or say yes in the chat box. Okay. So after we have it tied up, after we've started the process to get the money, then we bring the team in, both our standing team and possibly an extended team if we're facing something that we haven't faced before. And if it looks like something's not what it should be, we go back to our lead negotiator and say, hey, renegotiate, do your job. Okay? All right. Step number 6. At some period of time, at some point in time, you're going to have to make a go, no-go decision. That typically happens after you've consulted with your team. That's generally called in the world of commercial real estate your due diligence period. And oftentimes in your contract, you'll stipulate or specify, a specific due diligence period where you're bringing in all these consultants. If we're doing residential real estate, we don't typically use the phrase due diligence, but it's sort of your evaluation period. You're making decisions. But at a certain point, you're going to have to go or no go. And if the deal is good and you have the funds, do it. Got it under contract. I got the money. My team says it's good. Do the deal. Buy it, fix it, flip it. Buy it, fix it, rent it. Buy it, fix it, live in it. That's how Howard got his $1.6 million mansion. He was going to buy it, fix it, and flip it. And along the way, he fell in love. moved his family in, sold a house in Virginia, moved into his $1.6 million, 10,000 square foot mansion in the gated community Woodmore. But that wasn't his original plan, but who knows? Maybe along the way, you'll find a sweet deal, a sweet piece of property on a beachfront, whatever. You're like, you know what, I'm gonna keep this one. Happens to a lot of deal makers. Now, if the deal is good, but you ain't got the money, flip it. Flip it, make a quick buck. Nothing wrong with that. And oh, by the way, nothing wrong with doing this process, knowing you don't have the money, so you're doing a process to flip it. I had a situation when I was my first year in the business, second year in the business, where I had a property that I was going to buy and wholesale to somebody else, and the deal fell apart. So I wound up buying it and rehabbing it, and making $43,000 off of it, $48,000 off. Anything wrong with making $48,000 off your first rehab? Anything wrong with that? But that deal was not supposed to be a rehab. It was supposed to have been a quick $7,500 wholesale fee. But the person I was wholesaling the deal to couldn't get her husband to co-sign on the loan with the hard money lender. And the hard money lender basically had a rule. He said, if you borrow money from me and you're married, your spouse is going to co-sign on the documents. Her husband wouldn't do it. And she called me up and all in a panic. Sherman was supposed to go to settlement on Friday. This is a Wednesday conversation. Sherman was supposed to go to settlement on Friday, and the hard money lender won't loan me the money. I said, that doesn't sound like him. And I introduced her to the hard money lender, so I knew what his rules were. I said, that doesn't sound like him. What's going on? What's really going on? Because she didn't want to tell me she was too embarrassed to tell me what was really going on. I said, that doesn't sound like him at all. I mean, he loans money to anybody and everybody. That's why I took you to him. Well, he wants my husband to sign off on the paperwork. My husband doesn't want to sign off on the paperwork. Oh, God. So I tell you what, her name was Alan. It was spelled some kind of unique sort of way. I said, tell you what, Alan, let me call Rex and see what I can do. So I called Rex Frost up. I said, Rex, it's Sherman. He said, how you doing? I said, I'm calling about the deal on Capitol Heights Boulevard. He says, I know. It's about Alan. And I said, yeah. He said, well, her husband won't sign the paperwork. There's nothing I can do for her. I said, well, can't you make this exception? He got me. He said, Sherman, if her husband doesn't trust her with the money, why should I? You got me. So he said, Sherman, the deal's really good. Why don't you just do it? Now, I was in a position where I was not quite comfortable doing rehabs. I was really comfortable putting properties under contract and getting wholesale fees, but I wasn't quite ready. I didn't think I was ready. And he's like, Sherman, if you want to do the deal and your wife is willing to sign up on the paperwork, I'll make the loan to you. And when I sat down and looked at the numbers, I would have only had to bring about $100. In fact, it wound up being like $94 to the settlement table, because Alan had already put up a non-refundable earnest money deposit. And because she had already missed the first deadline, the seller wanted a second earnest money deposit. So instead of putting up $1,000, I think we had $2,000 or $3,000 up, which was more than enough at the time to make up for the equity. So hard money lender was going to loan me 100% of what I needed to buy and close to 100% of what I needed to fix up, less the money that Alan already had up. So I hung up the phone, went upstairs because my office at the time was in my basement, went and saw my wife, told her what it was up. She said, is it a good deal? I said, yeah. She said, let's do it. So I called Alan back. I said, I got good news, bad news. I said, Rex is not going to budge. His rules are his rules. He who holds the gold makes the rules. That's the golden rule when it comes to money. He's not going to budge, but I tell you what I will do. You gave me a non-refundable deposit. I will give you back all of your money because I'm going to do this deal. I'm going to rehab this deal. And when I sell the property, I'll give you back your money. Are you okay with that? And she said, yes, because better for me to give her back her money and not no interest, right? I'm just gonna give her back her money. Better for me to give her back her, I think it was $3,500, because the first, it was $1,000 earnest money deposit, and then she missed the deadline, and she had to put up another $2,500 because she missed the first deadline. I said, I'll give you back your $3,500, but you're not gonna get it back until I sell the house. Cool. So we bought the house, got the crew in there, fixed it, flipped it, made $48,000 after I paid Alan back her $3,500. I did exactly what I said I was going to do. So if the deal is good and you have the money, do the deal. If the deal is good and you don't have the money, flip the deal, wholesale the deal. Quite frankly, that's what commercial real estate investors do all the time. So you guys remember how I said last week, all contracts are assignable. It is not uncommon for a commercial property investor, because they're working off of a 6-month closing period, it's not uncommon for them to not only be shopping to get the money to do the deal, but also shopping the deal amongst their friends, and then flip the contract and wind up making a quick 40, 50, 100, 200, $300,000 on a commercial deal. That's very common in the world of commercial. In the world of residential, you don't hear many of those stories, but you can certainly set it up so that your intent is to wholesale the deal from the beginning. However, if the deal is no good, right? You do your initial analysis, you think that you can rent the property out for $3,500 a month, you tie the property up with a contract with your weasel clause, you get your financing in place, you get your team in place, and then the appraiser goes out and says, you know, you're not going to be able to get 3,200 because you can't count this basement bedroom as a bedroom. And so you're not going to make, you know, you're not going to be able to rent it as a 4-bedroom. You're only going to be able to rent it as a 2, because you have 2 upstairs and 2 downstairs. And so you're not going to make $3,500 or $3,200 a month. You might barely get 24, because technically it's a 2-bedroom house, because the bedrooms in the basement don't count. Well, you didn't know that when you put the property under contract. And so after you do the analysis and then you go back to your team, says, is there any way we can move this, move that, do this? And the team's like, nah, the deal no longer makes sense. What do you do? Put it in the chat box. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? That's right, Malika. You dump it. No, you don't wholesale it. If the deal's no good, you don't want to be out there trying to wholesale it, because then you're going to get a reputation as being an idiot. Do you know what Sherman brought me this week? Oh my God, who's teaching this guy how to wholesale? All he does is bring me garbage. No, you don't. If you know that there's something wrong with the deal, you just dump it. Okay? Now, understand this. To be fair, I kind of assume that you're attempting to wholesale the deal all the way along. If you're coming into the game as a wholesaler, you're attempting to wholesale it. So what happens if you put a property under contract and you can't wholesale it because everybody you talk to says you're overpaying? You dump it. Well, I got this one cousin and he's not real bright and he inherited all his money from my aunt. I'll just wholesale the deal to him and get my wholesale fee. Really? And how's that conversation going to go at all the family reunions, knowing that you stiffed your cousin with a bad deal? You stuck him with a bad deal. Don't do it. Okay? So again, if the deal is good and you have the money, do the deal, keep it. Do whatever you want with it. If the deal is good and you don't have the money, wholesale it, flip it. And if the deal is not any good because something popped up during your due diligence or your evaluation phase, dump it and just walk away. And that's, quite frankly, why we have weasel clauses in our contract. So that's step number 6. Step number 7, last step. Oops, what happened there? Oh my gosh, where's step 7? Did I really? Oh no. I deleted the slide. I deleted one of our slides by accident. All right, so good Lord Almighty. Sometimes I move too fast for my own good. Fortunately, I remember what it said. Isn't it good when you remember what it is you wrote? All right, step 7. Step 7, rinse and repeat. Step 7 is rinse and repeat. What do I mean by that? If the deal's a good deal, you should go ahead and do the deal. And it may take you a little bit of time to get everything all set up, but you want to do the deal, right? And I like to say, get it stabilized. So let's say you're doing a rental property, do the deal, get it rented, get your property manager in place, so get it stabilized. Learn from your success, then put it on autopilot. In other words, whatever you did to be successful in that prior deal, repeat it. And figure out if there's a way that you can put it on autopilot. In other words, can I hire somebody to do 90% of what I had to do so that I can keep 90% of the money, but only do 10% of the work? Always be looking for ways to automate repetitive things that actually work. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so those are the 7 steps. Let me go through it one more time really quick so that make sure you got them in your notes, okay? Step 1, generate leads. Step 2, have some kind of a process to evaluate, preferably something simple, back of the napkin, evaluate very quickly, don't get too bogged down. If it seems to make sense, tie it up, put it under contract, tie it up. Step 4, get the money, start the process of getting the actual money to do that deal. Step 5, engage your team. Make sure you haven't missed anything before you go to close. If you find something that looks like you made a mistake or something you weren't thinking about, go back and renegotiate the deal or walk away from the deal. Step 6, decide is it a go, no go. If you have money, use it. What if you put the property under contract and you weren't able to raise the amount of money you needed? Wholesale it. If it's a good deal for you, but you just don't have the money, wholesale to somebody else, okay? If it's not a good deal and you attempted to wholesale it and couldn't find a buyer, dump it. Because look, if you're actively marketing your deal to your buyers list and nobody wants to take the deal, chances are it's because it's not a deal. It's not a good deal, okay? And then step 7, rinse and repeat. Do the deal, get it stabilized, learn from your successes, put that sucker on autopilot, all right? Anybody have any questions of that 7-step process? Anybody got any questions of anything I just covered? Can you control Z the slide back? I don't know what that means. Sign of a good coach. Thank you, Dave. Like the guy just does it from memory, just types it in real time. You know, if you do something for 20 years, you do kind of figure what you need to do. And if the stuff works, you just sort of like, okay, it just becomes second nature to you. But thank you, I appreciate that. All right, got it? Is that clear? Is that clear to everybody? If it's clear, give me a thumbs up, please. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, all right, so now, let's keep going. Let's talk about specifically residential deal making, okay? So what I gave you was a generic template for all deal making, commercial, residential, any one of the 13 ways of making money, that's generic. And whenever you start in new on any kind of property or any kind of project or any kind of deal, you're going to use that 7-step process. Now, as you get better at it, you may consolidate some stuff, but it's still going to be like 7 steps. You just happen to combine 2 into 1, okay? When it comes to doing residential deals, and this is where we start actually rolling up our sleeves and getting to work, you're going to find what I found many, many years ago, but nobody ever really talks about this. You're going to find that approximately 80% in any given market, anywhere in the United States of America or US territories, approximately 80% of all residential deals go through something called the MLS. Mary, Larry, Sammy. Does anybody know what MLS stands for? If you do, type it in the chat box, please. MLS, what's it stand for? Yep, it's like all you guys know. Multiple listing service. So think about this for a second. On any given day, in any part of the country, more or less 80% of all single-family house deals go through the MLS. That's residential condos, that's residential land, that's houses. When I say residential land, I mean like small tracts, like somebody, you know, has a house and there was a house on it and it burned down and they want to sell the lot, right? I'm not talking about large-scale land development, okay? But in any given day, 80% goes to the MLS, okay? Take that as the gospel. Not just because Sherman said it, but if I were to dump you anywhere in the country, if you've got friends who are in other parts of the country and they're involved in real estate, ask them. approximately approximately what percentage on a daily basis of all of the residential deals being transacted go through the MLS versus some other way? I'm going to tell you 78%, 88%, 76%, 90%, but on average, it's about 80%. Some markets a little bit more, some markets a little bit less, but it's about 80%. Okay? 20% of all residential transactions that occur in a marketplace are what's known as Fsbos. And that's an abbreviation. Does anybody know what Fsbo stands for? If you do, type it in the chat box, please. What does Fsbo stand for? Yep. One person knows. Two people know. 3, 4, 5. Okay. For sale by owner. Fsbo stands for for sale by owner. Now, here's the little insider secret that most real estate coaches, mentors never mention that they need to tell you right up front. There's nothing in between. There's nothing in between. It's either in the MLS or it's a Fsbo. There's nothing, like some of y'all just had an aha moment. What? I said, well, Sherman, what about probate deals? Where do those occur? In the MLS. Sherman, what about bank REOs? You didn't say anything about bank REOs. Yeah, because they're in the MLS. 80% of all residential real estate transactions in America and US territories are in the MLS. And 20% are Fsbo, for sale by owner. And there's nothing in between. You're either going to find them one place or the other. There's no other place to find them. If it's not in the MLS, it's a Fsbo. And if it's a Fsbo, it's not in the MLS. Got it? There's nothing in between. Nothing. So anything you can think of, like you guys ask me about ask me about real estate transactions and say, okay, where are they? Where do I find these? Go ahead, type in the chat box. If you can think of something else, inheritance. It's either going to be a Fsbo or it's going to be in the MLS. It's either going to be a Fsbo or it's going to be in the MLS. If I inherited a property and I want to get rid of it, what am I going to do? Hire a real estate agent. And what's the real estate agent going to do? Put in the MLS, or I'm going to stick a sign in the yard that says for sale by owner. There's nothing in between. Auction. Auctioneers always hire real estate agents. If it's a foreclosure auction, it's going to be in the MLS by law. And I'll explain that in a second. Foreclosure depends on what stage of foreclosure it's in. Foreclosure is actually a 5-stage process. There's pre-foreclosure, where somebody's in what's called a notice of default, and they typically are also in a state of denial, where they don't want to sell the property because they're like, somebody's going to fix this. And because foreclosure process is a public process, meaning there's notices that go up, down at the courthouse, investors get those copies of those NODs and they direct mail the people the notice of default, and they direct mail the people while they're in a state of pre-foreclosure. If the person decides to sell the property at that stage, guess what it is? A Fsbo. If they get to the point where they realize this is going to go down and they decide to hire a real estate agent, what's the real estate agent going to do with that listing? Put it in the MLS. If they get to the point where they're like, hey, let's file bankruptcy and it looks like I'm underwater, and if I sell the house, I'm going to have to bring cash to the table, and the real estate agent says, hey, let's go ahead and do this as a short sale, the bank's going to require that it goes in the MLS. If they don't do any of that stuff and it winds up being a sheriff's sale, typically with a sheriff's sale, you do have what's called a courthouse step auction, in which case technically it's a for sale by owner because a sheriff is ordering it. And in that case, it may not be in the MLS, but still the owner still has it. And if it winds up actually going through foreclosure, then the bank's going to take it back, turn it into what's called bank REO, and by law, it's going to go in the MLS. So every one of those 5 phases of the pre-foreclosure, notice of default, short sale, foreclosure auction, bank REO, all of that is going to be either MLS or Fsbo. Pocket listings. Oh, Steve, you always come up with the most wonderful stuff. Pocket listings are illegal and you'll go to jail. Yes, pocket listings are the one exception, because what happens in a pocket listing is somebody goes to a real estate agent and says, hey, I want you to sell my property, and the agent doesn't put it in the MLS, and the real estate agent sells it to one of their buddies off their list, and typically the seller doesn't get the highest price, and when that hits the light of day, that real estate agent is going to lose their license and probably go to jail. So pocket listings technically are not MLS because somebody short-circuited the system. I'm talking about the legal ways to sell property, not the illegal ways. If we want to talk about the illegal ways, yeah, we could probably come up with about 2 or 3 other things. But generally speaking, in most jurisdictions, pocket listings are illegal for that reason. Now, pocket listings used to be very popular until everybody realized that the sellers were getting screwed by the real estate agents because they weren't shopping the deals openly and freely. They were sort of shoehorning these deals to their buddies. But yes, that's probably one exception to it's either in the MLS, because in a pocket listing, it should have been in the MLS and the agent chose not to. So yeah, you got me there. Tax liens. A tax lien is not necessarily the sale of the property. A tax lien is what happens when somebody doesn't pay their property taxes and the county puts a lien on it. And then if the owner, the investor who buys the lien decides to foreclose, then the foreclosure becomes a public process, and depending upon the jurisdiction, they may have to use a real estate agent to do the foreclosure process, or they may wind up negotiating a deal directly with the homeowner, in which case it's a Fsbo. So again, either way, it's one or the other. I is asking me about contact. Okay, you're getting a step ahead. No, you can't do that because that's part of the PIFA process. We'll talk about that later on. So fourth sale by owner, inheritance, we talked about that. Auction, we talked about that. Foreclosure, talked about that. Tax lien, talked about that. Pocket listing, talked about that. All right, can anybody think of any other circumstance where somebody might sell a property that's not a Fsbo and it's not MLS? Tax deed, same thing. Tax deed is subject to the regulations of the jurisdiction. If you owe money because you didn't pay your taxes, and an investor comes along and buys the tax lien and then decides to quote unquote perfect the lien, then that person who owns the deed or the lien, they don't own the deed, they own the lien, could negotiate a deal directly with the homeowner to buy the property to satisfy the debt. Or the jurisdiction, you don't see it in Maryland because Maryland's not a tax deed state, it's a tax lien state. The jurisdiction could decide to sell your property because you didn't pay it, in which case they're going to hire a real estate agent to list the property, and they're going to also post a public notice in the newspaper. All right, so again, it just depends on the jurisdiction. Eminent domain. Yeah, it's still a Fsbo. So for those of you who are not familiar with eminent domain is when the county, city, township, state decides to exercise its very limited police power. And those of you who read the Constitution know that the jurisdiction cannot just simply take your property without compensating you. So an eminent domain action is where the state or the city or the township decides that they want to put as an example, a new highway, and that new highway happens to run straight through your property. And the only way they can put that new highway in there is to take your property from you. And there's a very lengthy public hearing process where ultimately, if the court orders it, the state has to pay you money. That's technically still a Fsbo because they're still negotiating this. The state is the buyer, but they're taking it by force. It's still kind of a Fsbo, and it's also a very public spectacle, which is why a lot of jurisdictions don't like to do eminent domain. All right. So for the most part, abatement. I got to think about that one. I'm not sure what you mean when you say abatement. If you're meaning the jurisdiction taking a piece of your property, like the frontage, then in fact that's kind of close to also being eminent domain. So I'm not really sure, Evelyn, if you want to actually expand on that a little bit, because you kind of got me stumped on that one. And it's hard to stump me when it comes to real estate. So you've done well tonight. But does everybody kind of see it's either going to sort of fall on one side or the other. It's either going to be in the MLS, like again, of REOs. If oh, city abandonment property. So that's not abatement, that's abandonment. So in a city abandonment action, typically that's where somebody owed property taxes for an extended period of time, and then the city takes the property from them. Again, depending upon the jurisdiction, it could be the city going after the absentee owner and going through the court system to basically take the property back because it's an eyesore, whatever. Or the city could demand that they hire a real estate agent and that real estate agent market the property on behalf of the city. It just sort of depends. But again, in either case, it's either going to be a Fsbo or it's going to be an MLS. And in all the examples, the sort of esoteric examples that some of you guys gave, like eminent domain and abandonment and government surplus, right? Those are all they're all going to be very, very public because the municipality, the sovereign, has to advertise. Like nobody can just come in the middle of the night, kick you out of your house, take your house, and say the house is mine now and get away with it. Not even the jurisdiction. Again, that's protected in the Constitution. So it's a very public process. There's a lot of announcement. There's a lot of time in between. There's plenty of public notice. There's plenty of opportunity for you as an investor to find out what's going on and take advantage of it, okay? Squatters, technically squatters is not an acquisition. Squatters is somebody comes into your property, and in order for somebody to successfully take your property as a squatter, it has to be quote unquote open and notorious. In other words, you have to see them. If somebody just sort of sneaks into your house and you don't know because you were living in you were living in the Caribbean for 6 months to a year, and then you come back and you find out somebody's in your house, you can shoot them. I don't care what state you live in. That's what's known as the castle doctrine. If somebody enters your house illegally, no matter what state you live in, you can shoot them. And so they technically took over your house temporarily until you shot them, okay? Or you can call the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department will come and shoot them, okay? But for somebody to sort of like take your property through adverse possession, okay, that has to be quote unquote open and notorious, meaning you have to see the people living in your house, and it has to be for an extended period of time, like years. Adverse possession, quite frankly, is not really sort of squatters taking over a house like people think it is. It's really more along the lines of your neighbor built an addition to their house, and the addition to their house sits on your land, and you didn't do anything about it. And after a number of years has gone by, your neighbor goes into court and says, I want to declare this piece of land mine because my garage has been sitting on this piece of land for 4 years and my neighbor didn't do anything about it. That's what it means to be quote unquote open and notorious. Not, I came home from vacation, found the front door open and people were sleeping in the middle of my living room with a sleeping bag. Anybody who's got delusions of, and I'm not saying you guys do because you're raising these issues and these are good issues to raise, but anybody out there who hears this has got delusions of, I'm just going to go, slip into so-and-so's house because he's not around and sleep in the sleeping bag, have a couple friends come over. First of all, if the door is closed, it's not open and it's not notorious. And second, if they're sleeping in your house and you do eventually come home 6 months later, a year later, and they're still there, under the castle doctrine, you can shoot them. And most people realize, hey, the owner's home, I need to get out of here. And if you get wind of the fact that somebody's in your property and you don't want to go home or you don't want to deal with it or you're still on your vacation or traveling in the world, you can call the sheriff's department and the sheriff will go over, or the police department, and they'll go over and drag them out, okay? So that sort of notion of I'm going to just go in and just sort of quote unquote take over somebody's property, that doesn't really happen, okay? So again, at the end of the day, the most important thing is understanding it's either going to be in the MLS or it's going to be a Fsbo. And for the most part, there's nothing in between. Now, again, for every rule, yeah, there's an exception, but that exception in this case is like less than 0.1%. So what does that mean for us as investors? If we're going to be deal makers and we're going to do residential deal making, how many people here are interested in residential deal making? And that's why you're here, all right? You fundamentally got two places to shop. You're either going into the MLS or you're going after Fsbos. Does everybody understand that? You're either going into the multiple listing service to find your deals, or you're going after Fsbos. In all the examples that we went through, there are techniques and strategies to find Fsbos that are tax liens, that are tax deeds, that are eminent domain, that are, not quite ready to sell their house because they're a pre-foreclosure. There are strategies for finding those deals, but the general category, that general bucket we're going to find them is Fsbos. That's 20% of the market. If you start getting into those subcategories like eminent domain or pre-foreclosure, then you're potentially talking about less than 1% of the market. It's very niched. And I know some people believe in this saying, quote unquote, there's riches and niches, and I'm going to go fishing over here in this watering hole that nobody's ever heard about, because even though there's only one fish, there's no other fisherman. And you can do that if you want, but I generally recommend that if you're new to the game and you're still getting yourself stood up, getting your business stood up, why don't you just go where the fish are? You know what I mean? Rather going way out the beaten path, everybody else is going to the fishing hole that's a half an hour away, and you're going to go to that fishing hole that's 3 days journey because you heard there was one fish in that hole. And if you catch that one fish, it's worth it. Well, maybe not, right? Why don't we just go where the fish are? Well, if we use that philosophy, then where are the fish? Where are the majority of the fish? Where can we go in and pull fish out and pull another and another and another and another and another? That's the lake that's literally stocked with endless fish. The MLS. It's 80% of the market. And I know y'all have some boot camps you went to, you got some books and tapes you've listened to, you got some books you've read that go, stay away from real estate agents. Do not start as an investor with real estate agents. Okay, that's like saying I'm going to consciously make the decision to walk away from 80% of the market. That's like getting on an airplane and the first thing the pilot says is, ladies and gentlemen, take your seats, and we're backing off the gateway and we're taxiing down. And oh, by the way, I just want to let you know, we only have 20% of the fuel we need to get to our destination. I'm not quite sure, how we're going to solve that, but I'm pretty confident that somewhere between here and Chicago, we'll figure out where to get the rest of that fuel. You okay? All right, sit back and like, no. Everybody was like, take us back to the gate. We're getting off this thing, right? Why in the world would you want to do a real estate strategy as an investor where you're ignoring 80% of the market? Why do that? Well, the reason why most people do it, quite frankly, is out of pure ignorance. Most real estate investors who are selling get-rich courses in real estate, they figured out one little niche way to make money in the Fsbo market and didn't even bother trying to figure out how to make money in the MLS. And the first time they went in and approached a real estate agent, the real estate agent probably laughed at them because they were trying to do something different than what the real estate agent was accustomed to. And so they made it up in their mind, I'm not going to go back and talk to agents. And when I start teaching people how to make money with my little niche area, I'm going to tell them to stay away from real estate agents too. Well, I'm here to tell you, I've been in the real estate business for darn near close to, I almost don't want to say. That's right. 40 years. 40. I've been in real estate for 48. And as far as I'm concerned, I want all of it. Anybody else wants all of it? All of it? So we should be looking at both the MLS and the Fsbos. It's not either or. It's not either or. We should be doing both. So the real question is not Fsbo versus MLS or MLS versus Fsbo. The real question is, where do we start? Okay? So we're going to get to the Fsbos, but I generally don't recommend that Fsbos is the place that you want to start. And here's why. When you stop and think about it, the reason why the MLS represents about 80% of the single-family house transactions in the market is because when somebody's ready to sell a house, What do most people, most rational thinking people, what's kind of the first thing they do when they're ready to sell a house? Please put it in the chat box. What's the first thing they do? You ever sold a house? What's the first thing you did? Look for a realtor, look for an agent, get an agent, list it. Yes! Yes. Now here's the thing we got to understand. The multiple listing service is the way that real estate agents tell the world they got a property to sell on behalf of a client. It is the playground of the real estate professionals, the agents, the brokers. And in the world of residential real estate, because it's the same is not true for commercial, but we're not talking about commercial in this class, right? This is the class about getting your first deal done and learning the business in 21 days or less. And if we're going to talk about getting deals done in 21 days or less, we need to go to the place that it's possible to get a deal done in 21 days or less. Okay, that's residential real estate deals going into the marketplace that 80% of all deals get transacted. And understanding there's a certain way that deals get done in the MLS, and we have to adapt our strategies to work the MLS. Okay, but 80% sellers who are motivated enough to pay somebody to get rid of their property, like I can go to Home Depot. Heck, I don't even have to go to Home Depot. I can go online to Amazon and get for sale by owner signs for less than $10 a piece and stick them in my yard. What did it cost me to advertise that my house is for sale? $10. There's no skin in the game. There's probably no level of seriousness. Hey, honey, you hear so-and-so sold his house for $1 million? I wonder if we get $1 million for this house. Baby, I don't want to sell the house. I know, but I just wonder. Well, why don't we call my cousin, see if she lists it? Cousin comes over and says, okay, and you sign this paperwork. And well, what's this say? Well, if I find a buyer, you got to sell. Well, I don't want to do that. I just want to know what my house is worth. Well, I'm not going to list your house if you just want to like play around. Fine. I'll get me one of them $10 for sale by owner signs, stick it in your yard, and see who calls me. There's no serious motivation on a part of somebody who just puts a sign in the yard. They're just curious. And that happens all the time. So somebody who actually constantly says, I'm going to hire somebody and be willing to pay them as much as 5 or 6 or 7% of the sales price. I'm going to pay somebody $60,000 to sell my $700,000 house. I'm going to pay somebody $18,000 to sell my $300,000 house. That's a level of seriousness that goes way beyond the $10 for sale by owner sign in the yard. Do y'all understand that? Can I get a thumbs up if you understand that? So generally speaking, most rational people, when they're ready to go hire a real estate agent, they're kind of serious. Sellers who've been conditioned to hire real estate agents, you know, they're the ones who put the properties out there on the market. You know, the folks who like, you know, I need to go call Long and Foster or today Redfin or Keller Williams or Zillow. By the way, Zillow's a brokerage firm now, if you haven't realized that yet. Bank-owned property. If the bank owns a property and they want to sell it as what's known as REO, they have to use a real estate agent by law. Back in 1989, when George H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush, was president, he passed legislation, what's known as FIREA. And it was a direct result of the savings and loan debacle in the 1980s. And what that legislation said is if your institution gets any kind of federal support and you have to sell a piece of real estate because you foreclosed on it, you must, quote unquote, widely market that property. Now, to this day, nobody actually knows what widely marketed means. However, they know this. If they're responsible for selling the bank's REO, the bank's foreclosed properties, and they hand it over to a real estate agent, and the real estate agent puts it in the MLS, they can check that box and they can keep their job. But if they hand that property over to their cousin Sadie, and she does a pocket listing, and it later on finds out that property was never in the MLS, Sadie's going to jail, and you're losing your vice president job at the bank. And nobody who's a vice president at a bank wants to lose their job. So the simple, fastest, easiest way to check the box is just give it to a real estate agent, tell the real estate agent to list it in the MLS. Then they can sleep comfortably at night. So as a result, all banks that get federal support list their REO in the MLS. Now, what does federal support mean? Have you ever driven up to a credit union? Have you ever driven up to a bank? Have you ever driven up to savings and loan? And there's a little sticker in the teller window that says insured by the FDIC. Okay, that's a federal program that's federal support. And therefore, that institution is going to sell whatever REO they have through some kind of a listing process. Okay, and even those banks, there's a lot of banks now that use websites like Hubzu and Auction.com. They still mandate that those properties be listed in the MLS because it's belt and suspenders. And there's not a single person who works at a bank that wants to lose their job or potentially go to jail because they chose to list a property. For what purpose? It's not like the bank's going to get any more money. So putting in the MLS is an easy way and a conservative way for them to be able to sleep at night. All right. Probate deals. The judge is going to order you hire a real estate agent. Court-ordered property sales. The judge is going to order that it be listed with a real estate agent. Short sales. Because it involves the bank and a loss of money on the part of the bank's going to demand that it be placed in the hands of a real estate agent, and those real estate agents are going to put it in the MLS. Has everybody got that? Everybody got it? So all of those examples, they're in the MLS. In other words, they're being listed with the real estate agent. Well, what about the guy who uses Redfin or Mr. Lister? And all they want to do, like, it's still in the hands of a real estate agent, even if they're only paying that real estate agent a flat fee commission or a 1% commission. It's still going in the hands of a real estate agent, and the real estate agents are putting the deals in the MLS. Got it? Everybody got it? All right. So what about Fsbos? Fsbos, generally speaking, for the longest time, have always been sort of people who don't like real estate agents. I just don't want to hire a real estate agent. Does anybody want to guess what kind of person doesn't want to hire a real estate agent? Just out of curiosity. If you do, if you think you know, put it in the chat box. What kind of person doesn't want to hire a real estate agent? Nikki says cheap, frugal, cheap. No, they're actually the next category. Cheap, cheap, cheap. No, let me tell you the kind of person who doesn't want to hire a real estate agent. Somebody who hired a bad real estate agent. Exactly. Thank you, Trini. Somebody who's burned. I wanted to sell my house. I gave it to my cousin. My cousin didn't do jack diddly. But my mama said at the family reunion, you know, baby, your cousin just got their license. If you're going to sell the house, you got to let your cousin list it. Generally speaking, somebody who hates real estate agents is because they have firsthand experience and it wasn't good. And there are people out there, and that experience might have been 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but they're still like, ain't hiring no agent. Waste of time. I sell it better myself. Well, not really. Because stats show most people who aren't in the business of listing houses or selling houses really kind of don't have a clue what they're doing, and they never get the top dollar. So that's not a commercial, like this is brought to you by the National Association of Realtors. No, this is not a commercial. It's just fact, okay? Now, who else tends to not want to hire real estate agents and therefore is a Fsbo? Well, people who just don't want to pay a commission. That's where the cheap, frugal, I'm not paying any money, right? I'm not gonna pay any money, right? Somebody said investors. No, smart investors use agents if they want to get top dollar. Now they may nickel and dime their agents. They may beat up their agents, right? But they're not going to be stupid. They're not going to cut off their nose to spite their face. In other words, they're not going to say, well, I'm not going to pay any commission because I did all this work myself and I know the real value was the stuff I did. No, they're still going to put it in the hands of an agent because they're like, I'm better off getting, I'll give you an example. I just sold a property, made $100-some thousand on it. I paid the buyer's agent, because it's usually the buyer's agent, the person that represents the buyer, that does all the work. I paid the buyer's agent not only a 3% commission, but a $4,500 bonus if they got the deal closed in 30 days before the end of the year on a $365,000 house. So their base commission was like $9,000, and then the bonus was half the commission. So that's a good day. that's like a 5.5% commission on one side, but it was worth every penny to get it sold when I wanted to get it sold. And therefore I highly, now I'm an investor. I could have very easily said, no, I'm going to keep that money in my own pocket. I'm making $109,000. I'm going to nickel and dime an agent who brings me the buyer. That's stupid. That's just plain stupid. And then and then not pay them a bonus if they actually get the deal closed. And there was that deal was a roller coaster ride. Is Earl here? Earl will tell you. Earl was my private investor on that deal. He'll tell you, like every other day, well, Earl, this has happened. And it might be this and it might be that. I'm not sure. We'll find out what happens at the end of the week. It was a roller coaster ride because it was happening at the end of the year, holidays, yada, yada, yada. The buyer's wife went out and bought, I shouldn't pick on the wife, right? But the buyer's wife went out and bought something new and their credit tanked and they had to get, like, I'm like, dude, don't you counsel your buyers to not open up new accounts? Like that's 101 if you're going to be a licensed bird dog. Tell your clients, don't screw up your credit when we got a property under contract. But she did. But in any event, hey, that was his client, not mine, so I can tell it all. But in any event, Fsbos, again, are people who, for whatever reason, don't like real estate agents, want to nickel and dime real estate agents. But there are also people in state of denial. Like if I get the notice of default, if it's coming down that I'm going to lose my house in foreclosure, and I'm like, I'm somehow, some way I'm going to solve this, I'm going to fix this. They don't bother to go out and hire a real estate agent. And trust me, I know that feeling. I've been there, done that. When I was a much younger man with much less responsibility, I found myself in a situation of my house in Old Town where I was pretty close to foreclosure about 2 or 3 times. I was going through divorce. I was a bachelor. I was an entrepreneur and all the ups and downs of starting a business, not a real estate business, but a government contracts business. And there was like, 3 or 4 times I missed the payments. And sheriff actually got around to putting a notice on the door. This house is going to be sold at foreclosure in 30 days. And somehow, by the grace of God, I came up with the money. But if I kind of really felt like this was not going to work out, the smartest thing I could have done or should have done was hired a real estate agent to put the house on the market before the sheriff got around to selling it, because I probably would have got a lot more money if a real estate agent sold it. At the end, it worked out okay. But typically speaking, when people are behind in payments and they're looking at a foreclosure situation, oftentimes the first thought in their mind is not, let me just go ahead and hire a real estate agent and see if I can sell it. Oftentimes the first thought is, this isn't really happening to me. This can't really be, I'm a good person. How could this be happening to me? And I get that. Been there, done that. All right. So they're kind of in a state of denial. But the number one reason why a property might be a Fsbo, and Howard Johnson says this a lot, he's done a lot of deals with Fsbos, is the person just wasn't interested in selling until you showed up, came knocking on the door. And you waved an amount of money under their nose that like, okay, where's the paperwork? I'll sign. I'm out of here. And that, quite frankly, happens a lot. The owner's not really interested in selling until an investor comes knocking on the door or sends them some marketing or puts them in some kind of a marketing campaign. And the person goes, gee, my house is really worth that much. Maybe I'll just go ahead and take the money and run. I was going to think about selling it a couple of years from now, but I'll just go ahead and take it now. That happens a lot. So in any event, these are generally speaking why MLS deals or board of realtor deals represent about 80% and why Fsbos are really sort of 20%. And as I said before, there's really kind of nothing in between, okay? So here's what we need to know if we're going to go after MLS deals. And guess what we're going to be doing this week, guys? Going after MLS deals. And the main reason why is because I promised you I'd show you how to get a deal done in 21 days or less. And the fastest, most direct, simplest way to get a deal done in that period of time is go after MLS deals. But here's what we need to know. Number one, the multiple listing service, or MLS, it's 80% of the market. The multiple listing service is owned by realtors. It's not a public database. It's not a government database. It is not regulated by the federal government. It's owned by realtors. Or more specifically, there's more than one MLS. There's no national MLS. Realtor.com, which is the quote unquote official real estate site of the National Association of Realtors, which, oh, by the way, National Association of Realtors doesn't own. Rupert Murdoch and Fox Corporation, AKA Fox News, owns Realtor.com, because in the early days of the internet, the National Association of Realtors, a not-for-profit organization, didn't understand the power of the internet, and they sold the domain name to Fox with the understanding that there'd be a joint venture agreement to run the website. Dumbest move in the history of man. You never sell your domain name. Are you kidding me? Are you serious? So National Association of Realtors sold it to Fox, and on Realtor.com, there are properties for sale, but those properties that are for sale come through a feed that's grabbing data from regional and local MLSs, and it's aggregating that information and serving it up. But if any one of the boards of realtors decides not to feed that data to Realtor.com, you won't see those listings at Realtor.com, okay? So there is no quote unquote national MLS. All the MLSs or multiple listing services, because there are many of them, are typically owned by the boards of realtors in the local jurisdiction. So the state board of realtors or the county board of realtors. For example, in Maryland for the longest time, you had the MLS that was run by all the major boards. So Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Northern Virginia, DC, and Frederick County all banded together. And then the Eastern Shore had their own MLS. And if you were a licensed real estate agent in the state of Maryland, but associated with the Board of Realtors in Montgomery County, you couldn't get access to the MLS for the Eastern Shore. You had to either had to go get a license with an Eastern Shore broker or pay them money to do your searches for you. It was a very closed sort of market. And that started to change sort of during the early days of the internet, when folks realized if we're not making this information available online, we're going to be losing a lot of business, because nobody wants to hear you have to pay me money and get a computer terminal just to be able to see what's available. So a lot of changes have happened pretty rapidly, including a lot of consolidation. In our region, Greater Washington, DC, Northern Virginia, Maryland, we had an MLS, and interesting enough, the online portion that started around 2000, call it 2000, I don't know, maybe 2001 or so, it was called the Matrix. And so if you said that your MLS was the Matrix, everybody knew you were sort of from the DC area. It's one of the bigger MLSs. Well, we actually had a merger, I think it was 2017 or 2018, and we merged. So now our MLS in our region covers everything from New Jersey up to New York City, everything from New Jersey all the way down through Virginia, and including Delaware, Pennsylvania, pieces of West Virginia and Maryland. And it's called the Bright MLS. That was the organization that we merged with, but many of us still refer to it as the Matrix, okay? So there's several MLSs throughout the country. The local regional MLS is a private database. It's not owned by the government. Real estate agents access the MLS by joining their local board of realtors. That's one of the ways that the board of realtors adds value. It's like if you join a board of realtors, if you want to get access to the MLS and you're a real estate agent, you have to be a member of a board. One of the reasons why so many people want access to the MLS is because once you actually have access to the MLS, you also agree to make sure that anything you put into that database, you keep squeaky clean. And if you don't put accurate information in the MLS will fine you. And if you wind up abusing your access to the MLS too much, they will lock you out. And if you abuse your access too much, they'll lock you out permanent. And there's not a single real estate agent who's worth their weight who wants to be locked out of the MLS, because that's their primary tool for getting. That's like being a bus driver without a driver's license, right? If you want to make money as a real estate agent, if you decide you want to make money as a licensed bird dog, your number one tool, your stock and trade, your tool belt is the MLS. And every quarter, it seems like, I was going to say every year, but it's almost every quarter, the boards of realtors are finding new and better tools to add into the MLS that, quite frankly, a lot of the tools that we used to pay for separately, like Haynes, and there's a website that used to provide foreclosure data and pre-foreclosure data, all that stuff is now integrated into the MLS. So if you are a realtor and you have full-blown access to the MLS, there's some really powerful tools you have access to that mere mortals and average real estate investors don't even know are out there. Or if they do know they're out there, they're paying through the nose to get access to them. So again, in order to get access to the MLS, you have to join a local board of realtors. That's one of the rules of the MLS. It's a closed private club. It's a private system. In our region, our MLS online version used to be known as the Matrix. In 2017, the Matrix merged with a larger system known as Bright. So you'll hear people referring to Bright MLS or the Matrix. Brokers agents can provide their clients with limited access. So in other words, if somebody is an agent or a broker who has access to MLS, they can provide limited access to their clients. It used to be through something called Listing Book, but when Bright and the Matrix merged, Bright already had a relationship with a company called HomeSnap. And so now what most brokers and agents do is they give their clients access to the MLS through HomeSnap. But here's what they typically do. What they typically do is they set their clients up and they tell them where to go to download the app. And then they put a timer on it. Usually it's a 30-day timer. And if that client doesn't buy a house from them in 30 days, it automatically turns itself off. And so whatever access that they're giving to their clients, the typical real estate agents, typical brokers, it's very, very, very limited. In other words, I'll give you access to MLS so you can see what you want to see. But if you don't wind up buying a deal from me, if you don't wind up using me, then your access implodes. It's kind of like the old Mission Impossible, right? This will self-destruct in 30 seconds, right? Because of the fact that I am a licensed real estate broker, and we do have licensed real estate agents, we give our members at Real Investors access to this same tool, but you get access to it, and we don't turn on the timer. You get access to it as long as you're a member. You get it, in other words, you get it for life. So another little sort of sneaky feature that we don't use and we don't do, typically in most brokerage firms, when they do give their clients access to the MLS through HomeSnap or previously Listing Book, there's a feature in there that the agent can actually monitor, AKA spy, on their clients. And it kind of makes sense, because the way it works, if you're a real estate agent, is if somebody comes into your office and they says, hey, I want to buy a house, and you say, okay, well, do you have a proof of funds letter or pre-approval letter? They say, yeah. Or if they say, no, I don't have it, okay, talk to these lenders and get yourself a pre-approval letter. And then they have the pre-approval letter that says they're pre-approved for X amount of money. And then you start talking to them about houses that they can afford to buy based on their pre-approval letter. And you pull a whole bunch of neighborhoods that you think match what they want. And then you put them in the car, drive them around, and they don't like any of them. And you do it again for another weekend and another weekend. Pretty soon you're like, God, I feel like I'm wasting my time. Well, one of the really cool features of Listing Book and one of the cool features of HomeSnap now, because that's the predominant, that is the tool that we use now. It used to be Listing Book. But one of the cool features is I can give you access to HomeSnap or Listing Book and set you up, and you start looking for houses where you want to look for houses. And you start sending emails to your sweetie pie going, oh, honey, look at this one. And I, as an agent, if I use that sort of sneaky behind the scenes tool, I can see all that communication and see what you're telling your sweetheart about the houses that you do like and houses you don't. I'm spying on you. And quite frankly, that's the real reason why HomeSnap is really popular with real estate agents, the real reason why it was created. Same with Listing Book. Actually, Listing Book came first. And they sold all the MLSs on what a great spy tool this was to really see behind the scenes what folks were doing. And then HomeSnap kind of came along and took it to a whole nother level. That's the main reason why real estate agents give their clients access to that tool. And the main reason why they cut it off is that they see, hey, this person's not serious about the houses that they can really afford, or they're not serious about using me as their agent, because they also get to spy on your correspondence. Hey, honey, I looked at this house with this other agent. Maybe we should do business with them. And they cut them off, right? I don't even bother doing that because I could care less. I'm not interested in your private communication. So we don't turn that feature on. But what we do is we provide for our members this HomeSnap tool as a way to have their own access to the MLS, so that when you're out in the street and you're saying, gee, I wonder what houses in this neighborhood are selling for, there's actually a geocoding feature in there where you say, okay, I wonder what houses are selling for. And you just simply tell HomeSnap app, tell me what houses within a half-mile radius of where I'm standing right now are selling for, or a quarter-mile radius, or a 2-mile radius. Or tell me, better yet, what houses are renting for, because maybe I'm an investor and I'm kind of curious as to what I could rent this house for. And even better, if the real estate agent has done a virtual tour, or the client has paid for virtual tour, paid a third party to a virtual tour, the virtual tours and all the pictures are also inside. So you can literally stand in the middle of the street and see what houses are selling for, what houses sold for, and see the inside of those houses using this HomeSnap tool. Now, the way that our members access it is we set up a separate domain. So I want you to go ahead and go there now. I'm going to go ahead and click on this and copy it and paste it. And I want you guys to go in and download this tool and have it on your mobile device and start using it. And the reason why I'm not sending you to HomeSnap and the reason why I'm not sending you to Listing Book is because the MLS that we belong to could have another merger, or they could pick another vendor next week. And rather than continuously changing the name of the app, we just went ahead and registered the domain name realinvestorsmobilemls.com because that's for our members. And we just point that website to the appropriate place to download the app. So rather than saying go to HomeSnap and then click this button and put this information in, then go to the App Store. Oh, you're an Android user, go to the Android store, right? Really know all that rigmarole. We just simply say to the guys, okay, where should we be sending our clients? Where should we be sending our members or customers? Oh, that's the link. Great. Copy, paste the link, drop it into our website registrar, our domain registrar, and just point the appropriate domain name to the appropriate place. And then you guys can just go in there and snatch it. You guys like that? If you like it, give me a thumbs up. All right. So, and again, you have access to that for life as a part of this training. So, MLS versus Fsbo. Let's go back and look at that list of 7 steps that we went through at the beginning of class tonight. All right, let's go through that list of 7. Anybody remember what those list of 7 are? Step 1, do what? What's the first step? If you got notes, if you took notes, generate leads. And the tool that we use to generate leads is generally a marketing funnel, right? So on Fsbo deals, the way you generate leads is you put up flyers and bandit signs and websites. By the way, what does that sound like? What's that sound like? Come on, what's that sound like? Oh, Alfonso, you got to have a website. Oh, man, you got to go order 100 bandit signs. No, that doesn't sound like deals. That sounds like money. It sounds like costs. It sounds like you're going to have to spend some money just to go into business. Doesn't that sound like that to you guys? Sounds like that to me. Anybody here bought any bandit signs? Look, I know they're only $1.50 a piece, depending on what website you go to, but most people who do bandit signs, they tell you need to put up 300 or 400 before the phone even starts ringing. Anybody here built a website, a We Buy Houses website recently? If you go hire a web designer, you're paying them a couple $100 an hour. And if you go buy a website pre-packaged, pre-done from one of these website folks, well, that's probably $500 setup. Like, it's spending money before you start making money to generate leads. Everybody got that? Somebody said GoDaddy wants $3,200 to build your website. Fortunately, we're not going to build websites using GoDaddy. Trust me on that. All right. Step 2. What's step 2 in our deal maker blueprint? Anybody remember? Some kind of deal analysis. So in the world of residential real estate, we have something called the Mayo Formula. Mayo Formula. All right. And the Mayo Formula kind of looks like this. Let me do my insert text box. So the Mayo Formula looks like this. Mayo equals the after repair value of the houses we're looking at minus, the after repair value times 0.70 or 0.75 minus my rehab costs. Everybody understand that? So Mayo looks like the after repair value times 0.7% minus my rehab costs. Everybody see that okay? Everybody see that okay? Yes? Somebody tell me this. Where do we find the after repair value of a neighborhood? Where do we find the after repair value of a house? What tool do we need to be able to figure out ARV? Yeah, the MLS. In other words, we got to run comps. So before we can even start talking about making offers on Fsbos, we still got to go back in the MLS if we're going to do this. We need the MLS to get our comps so that we can determine ARV. Does everybody see how that works? So before we can start doing deal analysis for Fsbos, the first step in the process is learn how to pull comps from the MLS. And wouldn't we kind of like to have something on our mobile phone device when we put up those bandit signs and somebody says, hey, I want to sell my house. You say, what are you asking? So I think my neighbors are selling their houses for 500, but you know what? I'll take 100 grand. Now, let me ask you something. If somebody says, I'll take 100 grand, what's your next step? Spend 15 hours on a spreadsheet to see if it's worth 100 grand? Or hop in the car with contract in your back pocket and get it tied up? Exactly. Now, when you get in the car with the contract in your briefcase or portfolio or backpack, whatever, and you get to that person's house, wouldn't it be great to be able to whip out your iPhone or your Droid and go to that MLS app and see what houses are selling for right there on the spot in that house? So again, in order to come up with the ARV, you still have to go back to the MLS. All right, step 3, documents. I need a document to tie up the deal. Well, where do I get the documents to tie up a deal when I'm dealing with a Fsbo? Should I expect that the homeowner who's a Fsbo is also going to have a contract waiting for me when I show up? Okay. So somebody said realtor. No, generally speaking, you're not going to use realtor contracts on Fsbo deals. So when you're ready to start dealing with Fsbos, you kind of want to have some contracts that have already been blessed and vetted by a lawyer before you get started. Vetted by a lawyer. Gee, what does that sound like? You got some lawyers do that for free? Yeah, more money. Somebody put that in the chat box. More money, more money, more money, right? You're spending, like when you go after Fsbos, do you guys see how you're already spending money even before you get anywhere close to a deal? Right? I got to spend money on the marketing. I got to spend money on the lawyer, right? I got to spend money on a contract, right? Now, again, I'm not poo-pawing and I'm not saying we're not going to tackle Fsbos, but wouldn't it be great to kind of have some money coming in your pocket before you got money going out of your pocket? Anybody like that idea of having a little money coming in before the money starts going out? Okay. All right, so next step. What was the next step, right? Step 4, after we get it tied up, what's step number 4? Get the money, right? Now, Fsbo deals are in many respects are not that different than border realtor or MLS deals. And in fact, in some cases, you can use nothing down strategies like seller financing, subject to lease option. So this is kind of one area where maybe Fsbos sort of have an advantage because you may not have to bring money to the table. So I sort of say, okay, Fsbos get the advantage when it comes to financing if you're using creative financing, okay? But here's the challenge when you're using creative financing. Who's negotiating the deal? You or the seller? You go meet with the seller, and the seller says, okay, I got your letter saying we buy houses. Make me an offer. You make him an offer, right? Who's got the contract? You or the seller? Who's coming up with the strategy for how you're going to buy the house? You or the seller? You think the seller's just going to say to you, you know what? That sounds all good, right? Right? MJ, that sounds good. Tell you what, why don't you just go ahead and take the deed and let me write out a little subject to agreement. Not gonna happen. You have to walk the seller through that process. You have to know what strategy you want to use. You have to take them down a path, and if they reject that path, take them down. In other words, you got to know what you're doing. Will everybody agree with me? You kind of have to have a little experience in this business if you're going to be dealing directly with sellers, Fsbos. And you'll get there. Experience will come. But most people don't have the experience necessary to negotiate a deal and have have the contracts written out and have a plan A and a plan B in case the first two plans are rejected. Most people don't have that experience right out the gate. So when we start talking about getting deals done in 21 days or less in your first deal done, Fsbos are just really not starting to make a lot of sense as the place to start. Maybe there's a better place to start and then circle back to the Fsbos. Anybody beginning to see that a little bit? That maybe Fsbos is not the best place to start? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying don't do Fsbos. I'm saying maybe we start someplace else and then come back to Fsbos. All right? Hey, step 5. What's step 5? Anybody remember? What's step number 5? Step number 5. What is it? Engage the team. All right. Those of you who have not done a deal yet of any type, you're totally new to this business. There's a handful of you. What team you got? Who's your title attorney? Who's your contracts attorney? Who's your contractor? Who's your lead negotiator? Tell me what your team looks like. Yeah, and you're gonna go out there and take on the AFC champions because you want your first game to be the Super Bowl. Don't do it. So here's my point. We're gonna have to have a team because the seller's got what? What's the seller got? Nothing. Seller doesn't have contracts. Seller doesn't know contractor. Seller doesn't have lawyers. Seller is expecting you to make an offer to buy their house, and you bring everything necessary to make that happen. So you kind of already have to have your own team. BYOT, bring your own team. Step 6, go, no go. Right? And generally speaking, go, no go is best done when you have a buyer's list. So we need to also talk about building a buyer's list. And then step number 7, rinse and repeat, meaning take what you learn and put it on autopilot. If it worked well, put it on autopilot. I'm gonna tell you something. Fsbos got a lot of moving pieces. And there are some parts of the Fsbo game that you can put on autopilot, like getting the notices of default from the courthouse and sending out the letters of, are you interested in selling your house? Yeah, you can automate something like that, right? And I know some of you are asking me, what about the PIFA law? I'm not talking about the PIFA law. Let's, for just a split second, assume we're not dealing with properties that are in foreclosure in Maryland. So we don't have to add the additional layer of the PIFA law. I'm just saying, if I was going after foreclosures in DC or Virginia, which doesn't have a PIFA law, the process of identifying those for sale by owners that happen to be coming out of the courthouse, yeah, maybe there's some part of that I can put on autopilot. But what about the person who's got the notice of default and they're not quite sure they actually want to sell their house in the process of like knocking on the door? I'm going to go see them and getting face to face and convincing them, hey, maybe the best thing you could do is sell. Like, they haven't decided they're ready to sell. They're quite frankly not motivated to sell. They're motivated to do something because they're feeling like they're going to kind of lose their house. But maybe the selling the house isn't at the top of the list yet. Well, how much time am I going to spend with them before they're ready to actually sell the house? On average, when you actually start talking to people who do go after Fsbos and do go after pre-foreclosures, they'll tell you that oftentimes somebody's in a state of pre-foreclosure for years. They miss payments, they're in the notice of default, they're 2 months behind, they're 3 months behind, and then they get caught up. And then some situation happens 6 months later, and they're back in that cycle. And then they get caught up. And then something happens 6 months later, 8 months later, 12 months, and they're in that cycle, but this time they don't catch up. Anybody who does a lot of foreclosure investing, again, forget about Maryland for a second, forget about the PIF law, just does this on a regular, they'll tell you that the follow-up is so critical because oftentimes that person's in and out of a state of foreclosure 3 or 4 or 5 times before they're ready to sell. That could be years. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're talking about getting the first deal done and getting it done in 21 days or less, there's so many variables when it comes to Fsbos that yes, there's some parts of it you can automate and some parts you can make happen fairly quickly, but there's a lot of it that's just a hurry up and wait kind of game. And you'll oftentimes hear people who are successful in that part of the business talking about the drip campaigns they put people through, because as Ron LeGrand says, and I'm not one to quote Ron LeGrand a lot, but he's got an expression, I think he's right, time and circumstance change all things. Meaning the person who won't sell to you today at this price, if you stay on top of them for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, sooner or later, they're going to come to the realization that maybe I need to sell my house. But that's years, not 21 days. Best case, it's months, not 21 days. So again, I'm walking you guys through this not to put a poo-pah and a damper on your desire to go after Fsbos, but I'm shining a light on it to say it's darn near, impossible is the wrong word, but very, very difficult to make something happen in the world of Fsbos in 21 days. And more importantly, even if you're successful in making something happen, there are a lot of moving pieces that many of which can't be automated, can't put on autopilot, okay? So now let's take a look at MLS deals, okay? Let's take a look at MLS deals. Go through the same process. What's step one? Anybody remember what's step one? Going back to our list, generate leads. How do you generate leads in the MLS? You don't, they're already there. These are people who've already said, I want to sell my house. They've already put it in. You don't have to do bandit signs. You don't have to do yellow letters. You don't have to do anything other than just go in the MLS and see what's available today. Got it? It's like, hey, you want to eat tonight? Do you want to grow your own carrots? Do you want to stock your own meat? Or you just want to go to the Giant? Better yet, let's go to the restaurant. Better yet, let's order drive-through. It's already there. The stuff is already there. The MLS is like the Amazon of people who want to sell their real estate. They've already brought the deal to the table to say, hey, I'm ready to sell. You don't have to convince them of anything other than that your deal is better than somebody else's deal. But the lead generation, it's already there. Not only is it already there, it's searchable. It's searchable, it's sortable, it's automated already. You guys download the tool I gave you, the mobile MLS. You can go in there and start finding properties today, find neighborhoods today, and set automation features that say, hey, anytime a property comes available in this zip code or this neighborhood or this street, I want you to send me a text message. I want you to send me an email. Like the deals are literally coming to you. Anybody like that idea? Choice A, put up bandit signs, send out yellow letters, knock on doors, and sometime in the next 30 days, maybe then 1 or 2 people in the neighborhood who are ready to sell will call you, and hopefully you'll answer their phone call in time. Choice B, go to the MLS and see what's available in that neighborhood because the ones who are already motivated enough to sell have already put it in the MLS. Who wants B? I do. Yes. And more importantly, if we're talking about making something happen quickly in like 21 days or less, why don't we just go where the fish are? Instead of getting out a bunch of lures and casting a bunch of rods, why don't we just get a spear and go, look, there's one, there's one, there's one. That's what it's like going to the MLS. The people who are already ready to sell, the leads are already there. Got it? You got to give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up. All right. What's step number 2? What's step number 2? Analysis. What's the number one tool we need to do deal analysis when it comes to single family houses? Comps. And where do we get comps, valid comps? The MLS. So again, we got to go to the MLS anyway to do step 2. So why don't I just go to the MLS and stay in the MLS for a while to create a program that we can put on autopilot starting next week. Step 3, documents to tie up the deals. Well, if I'm going after MLS deals, multiple listing service deals, by definition, they didn't get in there unless they're being listed by a realtor. Remember who I said owns the MLS? Who owns the MLS? Who owns the MLS? Who owns it? Realtors and boards of realtors, correct, and groups of realtors. Now, the realtors got together several years ago and said, look, and I'm talking decades, look, why do our clients have to go see a lawyer every time we need a contract to buy and sell a house? Why don't we just go ahead and create a standard board of realtor contract, go to the state legislature and get them to pass a law that says if you use a standard board of realtor contract, there's no reason to get a lawyer involved to review the contract. And let's just cut the lawyers out of the loop altogether. And the state legislature says, fine, as long as you don't have major modifications to the contract, and as long as the real estate agent says, hey, this is what we use as a standard board of realtor contract, you can have your lawyer review it if you want, but generally speaking, most people here in Maryland don't get lawyers to review the contracts because it's a standard board of realtor contract. Well, if you are going into the MLS and you are using a board of realtor contract, then what does that cost you to use that document? How about nothing? Now, here's the trick. You cannot and you should not use board of realtor contracts for non-board of realtor deals. And the truth of the matter is you don't want to use board of realtor contracts for your Fsbo deals. Think about this for a second. Think about it before you answer it. If the board of realtor contract was drafted by the board of realtor lawyers, approved by the real estate commission, and blessed by the state legislatures because it was drafted by the board of realtors, then who do you think that contract protects the most? The buyer, the seller, or the realtors? You got that right. You absolutely, like, some people like Five Guys, and some people like In-N-Out, and some people like McDonald's off the dollar menu. Okay? If you want a real hamburger, make it at home. But if you just want something quick and dirty, I shouldn't use the word dirty when I'm talking about food, right? You go to McDonald's, go to the drive-thru, and get the dollar burger. But it's nothing to write home over. Well, guess what? The board of realtor contract, it's vanilla. It's got stuff in there that's designed to protect the realtor. As an example, you guys remember how I said a couple of days ago that all contracts are fully assignable unless the contract says it isn't? Well, guess which contract says you can't assign the contract unless you get both sides to agree to it? The board of realtor contract. So why is that in there? Is that to protect the buyer? Is that to protect the seller? It's kind of in there to protect the realtor. Okay? And there's a lot of stuff in those board of realtor contracts that don't favor the buyer or the seller. When you start buying Fsbos and going after Fsbos, you kind of want a contract designed by a lawyer that's designed to protect you, the buyer. And when you're ready to start selling properties or leasing properties, you probably want that same lawyer to draft contract documents that are designed to protect you and not the other side. Almost every contract out there favors one party or another, unless it's a board of realtor contract. And in a board of realtor contract, the number one group of people that it's designed to protect is the realtors. Does everybody understand that? So as a result, We use border realtor contracts when we go after border realtor deals. In other words, deals that have real estate agents in there. In other words, deals that are in the MLS. But when we start going after Fsbos, we don't want to use border realtor contracts. And you shouldn't use border realtor contracts. A, there's language in there that you really don't need and don't want when you're doing Fsbo deals. And B, the border realtor contract technically belongs to the border realtors. And the only reason why you are allowed to use it is because the deal is inside the MLS. Got it? Has everybody got it? If you get it, give me a thumbs up. All right. So for this next week, we're going to focus on the border realtor contract, and we're going to focus on getting border realtor deals. And because we're using the border realtor contract, we don't need to pay some lawyer to help us set this thing up. Does everybody understand that? And when you step out of the MLS world and start going after Fsbos, then yes, you need to have a decent contract. You need to have an attorney draft that contract. And quite frankly, you could probably get an attorney to draft a really good contract for you and then use it over and over and over and over again, so you don't have to go back to that same attorney every time you want to do a deal. But you're not going to use border realtor contracts for Fsbo deals. And most importantly, you're not going to use Fsbo contracts for border realtor deals. Do not try to bring those contracts that you downloaded off the internet into the into the MLS world. It will not work. And I'll explain to you tomorrow why it will not work. But just trust me on that. We're not going to do that. All right. So contracts, to tie it up, we can use border realtor contracts and they're free. We get them from our agent. Get the money to do the deal. This is very similar to Fsbo deals with one notable exception. When we are going after border realtor deals in the MLS, one of the standard ways that realtors do business is something called a proof of funds provided by the buyer. And proof of funds is exactly what it sounds like. We are proving that we have funds. Now, there's 3 ways you can do proof of funds, and you may want to write this down. It's not in my slides. And I'll be talking about this more this week. But there's 3 ways you can do proof of funds. Number 1, you can have a suitcase full of cash. You're going after a house that's worth $300,000, have $300,000 in cash. Number 1. Number 2, you can get a letter from a lender. Most people who are traditionally buying houses will typically go to their lender, get pre-qualified, meaning 650 and above FICO score, certain amount of cash in the bank. And if you want to go to your credit union or you want to go to your banking relationship and have them pre-qualify you and give you a letter saying that you're pre-qualified. But the problem with those letters is A, you do have to actually qualify. And B, usually those letters are written for a specific property or a specific period of time. Okay. But that is a place to go get a proof of funds letter. But that's not where we're going to go to get proof of funds letters. You can also get a proof of funds letter from a hard money lender. And that's going to be one of the first ways we use hard money lenders. Not tonight, but in a couple of days, I'm going to show you how to get a filthy stinking rich as a wholesaler using the right kind of hard money lender. And one of the first things we need from a hard money lender is a proof of funds letter. Everybody who's going through this class is going to get a proof of funds letter. I will tell you tomorrow night where to go get that letter, but not tonight because you got other homework for tonight. So don't worry about having the quote unquote POF or proof of funds letter necessary to go after border realtor deals, because I'm going to basically give it to you. Okay, we have a relationship with a hard money lender that will give all of our students a proof of funds letter for free. So I'm going to show you how to get that tomorrow. All right. Next, what's step number 5? Anybody remember?
Build your team.
Okay, mute yourself. In the chat box, y'all know the rules. We're on day 8, people. Day 8. All right. Engage the team. He said it. He was supposed to put in chat, but he was right. All right. Engage the team. Now, when you're totally new to the business and you don't have a team, where do you go to get a team? Where do you go to get a team when you don't have a team? Yes, your realtor is your best place, because most realtors have relationships with contractors, have relationships with title companies, have relationships with the various specialties, because they're in the business of facilitating transactions. And therefore, they're in the business of forging and fostering and creating relationships with people who represent the team that you need. when the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball decide they're going to create a franchise expansion team, they don't say to the person who's got $1 billion, okay, we'll give you the rights to have the team in Washington, D.C. Now you got to go find the coach. You got to go find the player. No, they give them the team prepackaged and say, okay, here's the team. Now you get to rename them. You get to hire, fire the managers, hire, fire the players, but we're giving you a team that's ready to go so you can be playing baseball the day you buy the team. When you are getting started in this business, you don't want to take the 5, 6, 7, 8 months to interview a bunch of people and try to bring them onto your team. Just go find somebody who's already got a team and tap into their team and bring them on board. And if later on you decide, I don't really like this title company, I don't really like this contractor, I'm not really crazy about this inspector or this appraiser, fine, recast your team. But it's easier to trade one player for another than build a whole team from scratch. If that makes sense to anybody, can you please give me a thumbs up? You don't want to be building teams from scratch. It takes too darn long. It's too darn hard. Go find somebody who already has a team and say, hey, let me tap your team for a while and let me have some of your members of your team become members of my team. All right. Then step number 6, the go, no go decision. We're starting off wholesaling. We're going to use Board of Realtor contracts. I'm going to show you what weasel clause, not clauses, weasel clause you need in that contract. So if it winds up being a no-go, you can back out of that deal and not lose a nickel. It won't cost you a nickel to do anything, and you won't lose a nickel. How many people like that as a strategy for getting started in business? You guys realize if you want to get a McDonald's franchise, it's $1 million. You guys realize if you want a Papa John's franchise, it's $300,000. You realize if you want to get out there and start doing Fsbos deals, you're probably going to have to wind up investing somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 just to get started. I'm showing you a strategy that you don't need a dime to get started. You really, really, really don't. And I'm going to walk you through this week the step-by-step process, but I want everybody to have a really clear understanding what we're doing. We're going after the biggest part of the market. We're focusing on residential deals, and we're going to basically go in and we're going to hack the MLS. What does Sherman mean by hacking the MLS? I'll tell you that in a second, but let me get through this last 2 bullets. So we're going to do a process where we're tapping the MLS that has a standard way of doing business, standard contracts, standard way of evaluating deals. We're going to be successful at it, and then we're going to put it on autopilot. And oh, by the way, when you have standard contracts, standard way of doing business, standardization, what does that sound like when it comes to automation? If something's standard, is it typically easier to automate or harder to automate? Easy. I'm going to show you a process that once you get it, the next step in the process is automate it so that you can be collecting 90% of the profits while only doing 10% of the work. I want you to learn it well enough to build a team and then have that team come on board and do 90% of the work for 10% of your profits. So that then you can pivot and go do something else. And the proper way to think about it is this, last 2 bullets. MLS deals, what I'm teaching you this week, think of it as quote unquote phase 1. This is where we start. And then after we get this under our belt, I'm going to show you how easy it is to pivot into phase 2, which is the Fsbos deals. So again, I'm not saying MLS versus Fsbos. I'm saying let's just start with one and then transition into the other. Because it's so much easier to start with MLS deals and transition to Fsbos than start with Fsbos and try to transition back into MLS. Does everybody understand that? Can I get a thumbs up for that? All right, if you got questions, please type them in the chat box because I'm getting ready to show you 1 or 2 more slides and then we're done. All right, somebody said hard money lender. I don't know what that means. What are you asking me? What is the third proof of funds? So the 3 ways of having proof of funds are a pot of money, a letter from a lender, a traditional lender like a bank lender, or going to a hard money lender and getting a proof of funds letter. Oh, that's what you're saying. Hard money lender is the third way. Yes. Now, here's another little technique that you can use. If you happen to have a retirement account, if you happen to have a bank account and you got a couple $100,000 sitting in that bank account, you can use that as proof of funds. Proof of funds is not the money you're going to use. Proof of funds is proof that you have access to money to do the deal. Okay? Yes, thank you, Dia. So yeah, if you happen to have a pot of cash sitting in a bank account and you want to show that bank statement, you got a pot of cash sitting in your retirement account, you want to show that, you can do that. Proof of funds means exactly what it says. Prove to me you have funds. That's not, I want to know exactly the money you're going to use. I want a letter from the bank saying these are the only funds you're going to use. Like when you go get a letter from a banker that says we're pre-approved, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that banker is going to fund that deal. But for the most part, in the world of residential real estate, nobody's even going to take you seriously if you don't come up with the proof of funds money or a letter documenting that you have proof of funds. Okay. All right. So has everybody got that? And is everybody pretty cool and clear on the phase 1, phase 2, and why we want to go after MLS deals first and then pivot over to Fsbo? Is everybody kind of cool with that? If you're not, let me know. I'm serious. If you have any questions on that. But again, I don't want anybody as we move forward this week, all of a sudden go, well, Sherman, when are you going to talk about lease option? When are you going to talk about subject to? Well, what about the pre-foreclosure deals? Those all make sense, and those are all ways you can make money. And quite frankly, phase 2 deals, you oftentimes make more money than you make out of the MLS. But in terms of speed, in terms of getting things done quickly, in terms of getting that first deal done, in terms of having a process to continuously pull out fish out of the biggest pond in the ocean, the 80% where all the deals reside, and then putting that sucker on autopilot, it only makes sense for us to spend the next 2 weeks, 14 days talking about this, so you can go ahead and get started and then automate it and then move on to something else. As opposed to getting wrapped around the axle on learning how to do auctions, and then 6 months from now going, okay, Sherman, can you show me how to do that? Like, why don't we just do this first, put it on autopilot, and then go on and learn something else? And quite frankly, I'll have some suggestions for you by the time we get ready to wrap things up in 2 weeks as to what is the next strategy, what is the next best place to pivot to, assuming you're doing what I'm teaching you this week and next week, okay? All right. Realtor contract and assigning. Will you just find some realtors who will agree and someone who will not? Kenneth, give me a day. You're a day ahead of me, all right? I'm gonna show you how to assign border realtor contracts without getting all wrapped around the axle with the realtor. And I know some of y'all sitting there going, but border realtor contracts aren't assignable without getting the person's permission. I'm gonna show you how we can do that without going to get somebody's permission. And it's based on what I taught you last week. And if you did last week's assignment, when I'm ready to share it with you tomorrow, it's in the slides tomorrow, I had to think for a second, you'd be like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But if you didn't do last week's assignment, you're gonna be like, what the heck's Sherman talking about? So just saying, keep up with the homework, all right? All right, any other questions before we wrap things up for today? All right, agree, phase 1, then phase 2, cool. When going to the website that you provided for MLS listings, it shows HomeSnap. Yes, it used to be called Listing Book, it used to be Listing Book, it's now HomeSnap, but I'm taking you through Real Investors Mobile MLS to my HomeSnap page where you can register to make sure that it doesn't cut off on you in 30 days. If you just go to HomeSnap, HomeSnap's not gonna unlock all the different jurisdictions. You have to be associated or affiliated with a real estate agent, and only that real estate agent can then unlock those different areas. So if you go to HomeSnap on your own, HomeSnap will take your information, but you can't really search for anything. And B, HomeSnap's gonna cut you off after 30 days because there's an automatic timer that pre-defaults to 30 days that at the end of 30 days, the app's gonna stop working. So typically what happens is you meet with a real estate agent, and if the real estate agent's up to speed on HomeSnap, they'll send you to their quote unquote HomeSnap page, and they'll preset a 30-day timer. If you come to my page, there is no preset timer. As long as you are in this training, which you're in this training for life, and as long as you're a member of Real Investors and you come to my HomeSnap, which you access through Real Investors Mobile MLS. Why did I do it that way? Because when we first got started, it was Listing Book, and then it was something else, and then it was HomeSnap, and who knows, 6 months from now, it might be something else. So rather than having you remember all these different websites and domain names, just remember Real Investors Mobile MLS. And if it changes, we'll change where it points to, okay? Yes, download through go to the domain name, go to the website I gave you, Real Investors Mobile MLS. It'll redirect you to the right place on the HomeSnap. Fill in the information, download the app, you're good to go, okay? All right, so with that, I got 2 more slides and a case study and we're done. So, what if, red pill, blue pill. What if I could show you how to hack the matrix so that you get speed in getting deals, speed in closing deals, and speed in becoming a deal maker? Would anybody like that? Give me a thumbs up if you'd like that. Anybody remember the movie The Matrix? The good one, the real one, the first one. And Neo comes out of the Matrix, and one of the first things that happens is they jack into his cerebral cortex, and he's like, I know Kung Fu. And then he's like, I know Kung Fu. What was that? It was a hack. They hacked into his learning system and taught him something in a matter of minutes that normally people take years to learn. Proficiency, black belt in Kung Fu. Anybody here got a black belt in the martial arts? How long did it take you to earn that black belt? For many folks, it's years, if not decades. And here's Neo learning how to be a Kung Fu black belt master in a matter of moments by hacking the system. That's what I mean when I say hack the matrix. All right. I'm going to show you over the next couple of days how to hack into this standard way of doing business that realtors use and using their own rules to our benefit to get deals done very, very quickly and then put that process on autopilot. That's what I call the quick cash generator. Learning how to hack the system that realtors have taken decades to build and making it work to our benefit, and then putting it on autopilot so we can go off and learn another real estate strategy, another real estate technique, while this strategy is making us money. Got it? All right. So your homework assignment and your first step in hacking the matrix is to go to Real Investors Mobile MLS and download that app on your mobile device or devices. Because our MLS, our Real Investors MLS, which is now HomeSnap, covers everywhere from the Virginia-Carolina border, Virginia inclusive, doesn't cover the whole state of Virginia, but most of what we need, all the way up to a little sliver of West Virginia and Maryland and Delaware and the eastern shore of Maryland and the eastern shore of Virginia and central Pennsylvania and all of New Jersey, all the way up to the New York state line. These are all the MLSs. Remember how I said MLSs are regional? These are all the MLSs that have banded together as of 3 years ago to be a part of something called the Bright MLS. And our region, which was called the Matrix, is now a part of this much bigger system. And the way you access it without having that 30-day timer cut you off and not have to pay a nickel is to go to Real Investors Mobile MLS. That's your assignment. So once you do that, you're now going to have the same tools as real estate agents, with one notable exception. You won't be able to put properties in, but who cares? You don't want to put properties in. You just want to get access to the information. And over the next several days, we're going to be discussing how to hack the system, but hacking the system is based on you having access to this. So that's the first step. I want you to go there. I want you to download it. I want you to play with it and just sort of see your way around before I start showing you step-by-step how to actually use it. Understand this, and the rest of what we're going to cover this week, and you may want to write this down. All written offers must be presented. That is a rule that all real estate agents understand. And we're going to use that rule against them, because we're going to be out there putting out offers that are incredibly enticing, except for one thing. What do you think is the one thing that's going to make people gag when we put our offers out there? What's the one thing that's going to make them go, ah? What do you think that is? You got that right, price. They're going to want $300,000 for their house. We're going to use the Mayo Formula, and our top end offer might be $250 or $245. And you're going to get a lot of pushback from real estate agents saying, I'm not going to present that offer to my client. I'm not going to present that lowball offer. Stop sending all those lowball offers. And we're going to have to gently remind them, there's no such thing as a lowball offer. And furthermore, the law says that if you are a real estate agent, all offers must be presented as long as they are in writing. We're going to use a board of realtor contract to write up offers and send them out in mass, in bulk, in high volume, knowing full well that the other side is going to love everything about the way we write our offers, because I'm going to teach you a specific way to write up the offer, and they're going to balk at the price. And one of two things is going to happen. Either your offer is going to go in the trash can, or the real estate agent is going to come back to your real estate agent and say, hey, we kind of like your offer because you don't have a bunch of these clauses in there, but is there any way they can come up on their price? Then you're going to go say, absolutely. Let me go out and take a look at the property with my contractor, and I'll let you know what the revised price looks like. I'm going to give you guys two options, and you tell me which one you like. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see your faces. Feel free to type it in the chat box or not. Choice A, what most real estate agents do. They have clients that want to buy a house. They say, hey, let me send you over 10 houses because I've pre-selected which ones I want you to see. You tell me which of these 10 you want to go see, but we're only going to go see 4 or 5. So tell me which 4 or 5 out of the 10 you want to go see. And the client says, I like these 4 the best. Great. We're going to schedule a time to go look at them. And at the end of the day, I'm going to ask you which one you like the best. And that's the one we're going to write an offer on. And assuming it takes you 40 minutes or so per house, you're spending the whole day looking at houses to decide which one you're going to write an offer. That's how most real estate agents work. That's how they work with their clients. And since their clients are not in the business of buying or selling houses, they assume that the real estate agent knows more than they know, and they go along. That's option A. How many prefer option B? Option B looks like this. You're going to write up offers on 5 houses a day, send them out, and at the end of 1 week, 1 out of 25 calls you back and says, hey, the way you wrote up the offer, we were kind of insulted about the price, but you didn't ask for a whole lot of other stuff. Is there any way you can come up on the price? And you wait for the phone call from your real estate agent to say, hey, congratulations, you got 25 offers out the door. They want us to come look at 1 house. And we're gonna get the contract together, look at 1 house, and decide what we're gonna offer. Who wants option A? Spend an entire day or 2 looking at houses to decide which one to write on. Who likes option B? Send out 5 offers a day, and at the end of the week, be prepared to go look at 1 house. That, my friends, is hacking the system. The system says, we want you to come look at 5 houses to write up an offer on 1. That's how 99.9% of real estate agents do it. But we know that the rule says all written offers must be presented. Well, since all written offers got to be presented, why do I need to go look at the stinking house? Just go present my offer, and you tell me whether you like it or not. And if the only thing that we're stuck on is price, call me back and tell me raise the price. And I'll be like, okay, fine. I'll come on out with a contractor to see if I want to raise my price. Why waste my time looking at a whole bunch of houses that I may not even be able to get? Are you beginning to see what I mean by hacking? We're using the system they built against them. And I don't mean in a malicious way. I'm just saying, look, if we know for a fact that all the offers have to be presented, why can't I just submit an offer with the lowest price I think that's reasonably acceptable and wait for them to come back and say, hey, can you raise the price? And when they say, can you raise the price? I'm like, yeah, okay, now I'll come take a look at the house. It's a hack. But here's the problem. Some of y'all ain't got the skin that's thick enough to have somebody cursing you out because you submitted a lowball offer. Well, guess what? You don't have to talk to them anyway. We're going to hire a real estate agent, and the first thing we want our real estate agent to do and be is have a thick enough skin to get cursed out when the other side is like, what do you mean sending lowball? My head spins around like the exorcist. It's like, whatever. It's business. Only thing I need for you to tell me is, how low will they go? And if the only way I can get you to tell me how low will they go is to send over a written offer that has a low ball price, then fine, I accomplished my mission. If I just call you up and say how low will they go, what are you gonna tell me? Go pound sand. In real estate, offers have to be written to be considered. I didn't create that rule. I didn't create that matrix. I didn't create that system. So, okay, fine. You want it in writing? Here's my written offer. Tell me how low you'll go. Oh, you won't go that low? Okay, fine. I don't need to waste my time looking at your house. Are we starting to understand there's a little bit of logic behind Sherman's craziness? We're hacking the system. Experienced real estate agents get this. Experienced real estate brokers get this. Inexperienced, immature, not confident of what they're doing agents cave and crumble at the thought of sending out a bunch of lowball offers. You know what I cave and crumble at? Having to look at 100 houses to make an offer on one. Oh my God, who's got time for that? And oh, by the way, what if you actually could look at 100 houses? Now think about that for a second. Anybody here ever looked at a house to buy, either as an investor or for your own? How long does it really take you to look at a house? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes? Type it in the chat box. How long does it take? Half an hour? And how long does it take to get to the house? Travel time. So if you say on average, it's about maybe at best case 30 minutes to look at a house. And I'm going to tell you something. If you look at a house in 30 minutes, you missed a lot of stuff. If I actually am looking at a house to buy as an investor, I'm probably spending an hour in that house with my contractor going through everything. So those of you who are saying 15 minutes, you're the ones going to get ripped off royally. And then you're going to have your lip poked out. Come on. Well, let's assume for a second. Let's split the difference. You want to do 15 minutes? I want to do, let's say 30 minutes. Let's say 30 minutes. How long will it take you to look at 2 houses? An hour? How long will it take you to look at 50 houses? 25 hours? How long will it take you to look at 100 houses? 50 hours. Spread that over what? 5 days? 10 days? And by the time you get through looking at the house and writing up the offer on the 1 or 2 you want, is that house even still available? In a hot market like now, where houses are staying on the market for a week, and then you find out I could have just written the offer on the house and waited for the seller to come back at me and say, hey, can you raise the price? And I'm like, sure, give me 48 hours to go take another look, which happens to be the first look. We're hacking the system. There is no rule out there that says you have to look at a house before you make an offer. But there is a rule that says all written offers must be presented to the seller. We're taking their rules and making them work for us. And the reason why most gurus don't teach this is because they've never been a real estate agent. They've never been a real estate broker. They don't understand the rules. You guys understand, you got to understand the rules before you break them. You got to understand the rules before you bend them. You got to spend a fair amount of time in this business before you're like, that's stupid. Let's try it this way. And I know for a fact that the other side still has to comply because I know what the rules are. And most of the folks selling get rich quick in real estate that only focus on Fsbos have no clue how to hack the matrix. Did I mention to you guys I got my real estate license as an agent 40 years ago? I've seen everything. And I got some folks talking about, oh, Sherman, in the 21-day course, you really need to update this because that's changed so much. What's changed so much? The fact that we're now using handheld devices rather than matrix printers? Okay, granted, that part of the technology has changed, but you know what hasn't changed in 40 years? Buyer agency and seller agency, buyer brokers and seller brokers. They ain't changed in 40 years. When it does change, we'll have to figure out a different way to hack the system. But as long as sellers get to have their agent and buyers get to have their agent and the seller pays the commission and all written offers have to be presented, we got a technique that's not going to change anytime soon. We're gonna selectively find the ways to hack the system based on the rules that they wrote decades ago that are still going to be in place probably for the foreseeable future. In other words, I'm teaching you techniques you can automate, put it on autopilot, and not have to worry about it for years. Yes, maybe listing book will become HomeSnap and HomeSnap becomes something else. Okay, granted, who cares? But board of realtor contracts will still be the #1 way that realtors do deals. The seller will be paying the buyer's commission, the buyer's agent commission, and the seller's agent commission for years. And because we have these standards of the way that stuff has been done for decades, once we understand it and understand what actually works, we can turn around and hire somebody else and put some tools in place and use the tools that are already out there for free and automate this part of the business and go on to something else. Is anybody liking this idea besides me getting excited as I am hacking the system, hacking the matrix beside? This is where we start, and that's what we're going to be doing this week. Learning how to take the board of realtor rules, the MLS rules, the part of the system that represents 80% of all. And by the way, the MLS has represented 80% of the business for as long as I've been in the business. Well, what about this company and that company? Well, what about Zillow? You know, Zillow's coming along, they're spending all this money on marketing, and Zillow finally figured out the only way to make money in this business is become a real estate brokerage. And when they made the decision to become a real estate brokerage, guess what? Now they got to go by the rules of all 50 states because now they're a broker. Welcome to the club. That part of the business hasn't changed in decades and probably won't for several more. And all we got to do is figure out what parts of the business are the way they are that aren't going to change and hack them. And hack them so we can get speed in getting deals, speed in getting things done. And because, as my mentor Jim Rouse said, you learn this business by doing it, the faster you start getting deals and deal flow, the faster you start learning this business. You want to get speed in learning the business? You want to take on the Fsbos and make a lot of money in Fsbos like Howard Johnson does? Dedicate and devote the time over the next 2 weeks to learn how to hack the MLS system and make it work for you, and then move on to the next thing. Can I get a thumbs up if that makes sense to anybody? Makes sense to anybody? Okay. So last couple slides. Let me share my screen, and then we will do our homework assignment and get out of here. All right. So we're going to be taking advantage of the fact that all written offers have to be presented. We're going to be taking advantage of the fact that, hey, there's more to written offer than price. One of the big disadvantages that people place themselves in when they go after deals in the MLS is they think the only thing that's important to the seller is price. Not true. If you come in and try to buy a house from a seller and you offer the highest price, but you have 15 different clauses that got to be satisfied, things like subject to me selling my own house, subject to an inspection, subject to the lender approving, subject to using an FHA lender, you start putting all that crap in the contract, trust me on this. I recently sold a property and took the offer. I had 3 written offers in the first week. I took the one that was the lowest of the 3 because they were not asking for FHA financing. And my number one thing was to get that house sold before the end of the year, so I didn't have to start making a bunch of interest payments to the hard money lender. I knew for a fact, because we had gotten that property rehabbed so quickly, that if we had gone with somebody who wanted FHA financing, that would add another 45 days to the process. I wasn't interested in making 2 more interest payments to the hard money lender. That was not a part of my program. At roughly $4,500 a month, I would have paid $9,000 more. So yes, I took the offer that was $265, not $275, because the bird in hand would have closed, and it did before the end of the year. I was not looking for the highest price. I was looking for the deal that was going to get done. We have to be smart enough to realize that the number one thing we want to be doing when we put these offers out, hacking the system, is to make our offers friction free. Meaning, the only thing people should object to is the price. And if you guys are listening to anybody other than Sherman and putting stupid stuff in your contracts, and none of your contracts are getting highest and best or best and final, it's because you got a whole bunch of junk in there, or you weren't paying attention when I get to the segment on how to write up the offer properly or the contract properly, and you're sitting there putting stupid stuff in there that's creating friction between you and the seller. We don't need any friction. Only thing we need to know from the seller is how low will you go? I should write that out. Say it, put it in the chat box. How low will you go? And there's only one way to figure out how low they'll go. Put a written offer under their nose and see what they do. But the written offer has to have something that they completely love, except for the price. All right. Lastly, and I'm ready to close out. If you submit an offer and the offer is rejected, you're back to square one. I get a lot of people saying to me, Sherman, if I write up an offer and the person decides to accept my offer, won't I have to buy the house? If you write the offers the way I teach you the offers, they're not going to accept your offer. They're going to want to argue with you on the price. Well, based on what we talked about contracts last week, if I submit an offer in writing and you reject my offer because you don't like the price, aren't we back to square one? You, the seller, come back and say, well, listen, if you can come up a little bit higher in the price, I'll reconsider your offer. Okay, what about the first offer? Oh, I'm rejecting that. Okay, I'll come back in with my new price. I'll go out with my contractor. I'll take a more thorough look. Oh, look, we can raise our price by about $10,000, $15,000. But you know what? You remember how I said I needed 30 days to close? Now I need 60. But I gave you the price you wanted. That concept may not be clear to you today, but by the time we get through with this in a week, you'll understand the offer we present up front. If they reject it because they don't like the price, then we will have another opportunity to change 1 or 2 other things in the contract that maybe we weren't quite comfortable with, like, hey, 30 days to close, like no inspection. And we can come back in and ask for that the second time around when we raise the price. All right. Again, we'll talk more about that when we get to that section this week, when we start talking about writing up offers, which will be in about a day. No, it won't be tomorrow, but it won't be the day after. It'll probably be Thursday. Okay. Now, your homework. Should you decide to accept it? And you will accept it if you want to stay in this class. I want you to go to Real Investors Mobile MLS. I want you to download that app on your iPhone or your Android. And I just want you to play around with it. Just see how it works. Play around. Go through and see how it does with for sale properties. Go see how it does with for rent properties. Give yourself a virtual tour. Just sort of say, hey, I wonder around where I live here, what's available within a mile? What's available within half a mile? What's available at a quarter mile? And just play with it. Get comfortable with it. You don't need for me to tell you what specific parameters to do right now. We'll get there in the next couple of days. But when we get there, I don't want anybody going, okay, well, where do I go get this? I want it already on your, I want it not only already on your mobile device, I want you to have spent a day or two with it before we actually start talking about how to use it. Fair enough? If that makes sense to anybody other than me, please give me a thumbs up. All right. Does anybody have any questions at this point in time? We are recording to the Facebook group. You will be able to see it. You will be able to ask me questions through the recording. Great, 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 great. So again, that's your homework for tonight. Last thing, got a case study for you. So let's watch this case study. Some of you guys already saw it. Notice this case study is the third in a series that sort of completes the circle on how to wholesale a deal. If you were with me 3 days ago, if you were with me 2 days ago, you already saw the first part of this case study taught from a different perspective. Now you're getting the third and final part of this deal, and you'll have a more complete picture of what happens when we start talking about wholesaling deals. All right, here we go.
From Maryland, and we are sitting in my first total rehab and resale property. The property is in Capitol Heights, Maryland, and it was actually a wholesale deal. It was wholesaled to me by Day8, another Realinvestors team partners. And I actually did not purchase the property until April. There was some additional delays and hiccups with title. So I took possession in April, towards the end of April. And of course, by then we were in the throes, 4 weeks into the pandemic. And so there were several issues that caused delays. Well, first of all, the property was a complete wreck. And there were major issues structurally. So where I had initially planned for a quick, cleanup job structurally, it turned out that I just could not do that. And if I did, I was not going to be able to get a 4-bedroom, title out of it. Or maybe, as I mentioned, I purchased this property sight unseen, and but I knew that it was a good area. But nonetheless, we literally were at the beginnings of the pandemic when it was under discussion for wholesale to me, which was the end of February, March timeframe. So what I had originally negotiated with my hard money lender was the rug was being pulled from under me with regards to the amount of monies that I could secure from that particular hard money lender. And so with the assistance of Sherman, Jesse, and the rest of their teams, we went back to the seller, or rather they went back to the seller to renegotiate that price. And we were able to get the property at a reduced amount. It was about $25,000 less than initially priced. So after I took possession of the house and got in here to have a look, I realized that it was a mess, and it was still full of contents of items that had to be removed. And once that happened, we faced a lot of issues. The first being that there was a set of spiral staircases leading down into the basement that were not to code. And so that caused us to pause and try to figure out how to navigate that. Because without stairs that are to code, I would not be able to have bedrooms in the basement. So once we realized that the spiral stairs were not to code, that meant I was not going to be able to rent this property as a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, until we resolved the matter with the stairs. And so I spoke to a couple of contractors, and it wasn't looking good. And so I had to go back and rethink. So I had to make the calculated decision that I needed to figure out how I was going to solve the stair problem, because I needed it to be a 4-bedroom. Otherwise, I was going to, at best, break even, at worst, lose money, which I was not prepared to do. So another member of Realinvestors, Stephanie Terry, Sherman had me contact her because she's a bit more familiar with this particular area and these kinds of rehabs. And so that was all happening between May and June, having these conversations, thinking things through, speaking to architects and the like. Meanwhile, I get a citation because someone happens to come by, I guess from the county, and says, you know, the place looks like trash and wanted to fine me $50,000. Oh, did I also mention that they'd stolen the HVAC unit outside, as well as there was an oil tank full of oil from God knows 1950 that I had to deal with. So as you can imagine, that was just on top of all the other, you know, extra stuff going on. And oh, by the way, this is not my full-time job, so this was becoming like a real challenge for me to get this resolved. But nonetheless, Stephanie brought out her contractor, and he came in and right away felt like he could handle it. And what he was going to have to do was literally gut the entire interior of the house, including the stairs, and move some walls around, move the back door around in order to install stairs that would pass code. So that was the plan. So anyway, got through all that, submitted the plans, or not me, but the contractor submitted the plans to for approval and permitting. But again, because we were in the middle of the pandemic, it took 9 weeks to get that through. So we did not actually start construction until October 21st, 2020. And again, it was a complete gut job. Everything had to be ripped out. It was, you know, all the way down to not just the studs, in many cases down to the bare concrete. So with the decision that I had to do a complete rehab, I could not go back to the hard money lender, or rather I didn't think that I had time to go back to the hard money lender. And so I just made the decision that I would invest my cash to do the complete rehab, which is about $97,000. And that was a calculated decision because to not do that, I would have lost money. So nonetheless, with the initial investment, I had actually not put any cash down. I had an investor for the $25,000 that I needed to close originally. So the cost of the property was $125,000, of which I used $25,000 of a partner, David Allen, and hard money loan for the remaining $99,000 or so. And then, you know, with the rehab, the cost, you know, basically is between $95,000 to $97,000. And so it took, like I said, the rehab started October 21st. So about 8 weeks, because remember, we have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, we have New Year's, for it to be completed. And I'm standing in the property now, and it's January 14th. And we're about to list the property for $352,000. So basically, I will gross $230,000, pay myself back the $97,000 that I put in, and a gross profit of about $130,000.
My name is Claire Hines from Bowie, Maryland, and I just profited $130,000 on my first total rehab. And I'm a real investor getting real checks.
So some of you guys were asking me in the chat box if I could do a full screen. No, I didn't do a full screen because if I clicked anything, the video would have restarted from the beginning. But you guys can go watch this on the Facebook page. And if you're on a mobile device like an iPad or something, pinch it out and make it full screen yourself when you watch it on the recording, okay? So I wasn't ignoring you, but there was nothing really I could do about it. Now, those of you who saw the case study 3 days ago heard it from Dave and Neil's perspective. And those of you who saw the case study 2 days ago heard it from David Allen's perspective. And now you hear it from the investor's perspective. And I want to just point out one thing. She said in the video she had bought the property sight unseen. That's not completely accurate. The property was wholesaled to her by Dave and Neil, and she did go in and see the property before she made the decision to buy it from the wholesaler. However, the house was owned by a hoarder. And you saw some of the shots that showed, like, literally, so when she says she didn't see it, she actually saw it, but she didn't see how bad it was until they got all the junk out. And that's what she meant when she said sight unseen. In other words, there were parts of the house she literally had not seen because it was so full of junk. nonetheless, and her original game plan, if you heard what she said, was to buy the house for $125,000. So she bought the house for $100,000. That was a $15,000 markup from what Dave and Neil had it under contract for, which I think was $85,000, and then spend $25,000 to fix it up and turn it into a rental. That was her plan. However, because of those spiral staircases and some of the structural issues that she saw once they got all the junk out, she realized that she was not going to be able to rent it out and get the kind of rental income that she wanted. So she consulted with a couple of contractors she knew, and she wasn't liking what she was hearing. Contractors that she knew didn't really have experience with a full gut rehab. So I suggested to her that she go talk to Stephanie, because Stephanie does those kind of deals all day long. Stephanie does on average about 7 to 10 full gut rehabs a year on her own and with partners. And Stephanie met with her at the property, brought her contractor Santos, and Santos immediately said, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do this, we can pull that out, we can pull that out. You remember she said in the video, I don't do this full time. She was just looking to buy relatively inexpensive properties in Prince George's County that she could quickly turn into rentals and have some real positive cash flow. And had she been able to do a 4-bedroom house, she probably could have been doing somewhere in the order of $3,200, $3,300, and on a $125,000 purchase price, she's netting close to $2,000 a month, because the mortgage would have been nothing at $125,000. Unfortunately, she couldn't go down that path. She had to go to plan B. One of the things that we'll be talking about this week is having quote unquote multiple exit strategies. Meaning if you hit a roadblock on one strategy, can you go to another and still make money? And in this particular case, the exit strategy that made the most amount of sense was to go ahead and do a full gut rehab and resell it. And she could have gotten a hard money lender to loan her probably $80,000 of the rehab, but because it was during the time of the pandemic and a whole lot of hard money lenders were pulling back out of the market and being real skittish, she just said, for the sake of time, I'll just go dip into one of my savings accounts and grab the money and use that. And as a result, she got it done in a relatively timely fashion. It took the better part of 8-9 months, but again, all this is happening during the middle of the pandemic. All this is happening going from plan A to plan B. And at the end of the day, she's gonna make $130,000. Not bad when the dust settles. And that's after paying off the loan and after paying off her private investor. Not bad. House is on the market now, and I think Stephanie had a little bit of a hiccup because of a death in the family, obviously. But house is listed, I think, for $350 or $355 or $360, something like that. And houses in that part of town aren't staying on the market much more than 7 to 10 days. So in any event, those of you who may want to get a little more detail, see some of like if you actually can see it like I saw it and saw all that junk in the house, you'll understand what particular challenges buying hoarder houses presents. But nonetheless, if you do your numbers correctly and you have your multiple exit strategies, all of your surprises are happy ones. So your guys' assignment for tonight, go download your tool to access the MLS. And starting tomorrow, we're going to start talking about hacking the MLS to get deals. Okay? On a scale of 1 to 5, 1, I'm out of here. 5, this is pretty decent stuff tonight, Sherman. How we do? Please type it in the chat box. Cool. One of these days, someone's going to give me a 5+, but I'll take the 5s. All right. Thank you, everybody. Go ahead. Please work on your homework, which is really simple for tonight. And if you got any outstanding homework from last week, please make it up. And let's see if we can roll up our sleeves and start hacking the MLS and making some money this week. All right? Thanks, guys. Talk soon. See you soon.